How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Greels. I'm your host, Robert Greeley, and today we have Vic Gill coming on the podcast. Honestly, you know what? There's no capital hoops during this time of the year, so why not have a 2-hour-long episode of chatting with someone who was a part and, contributed to an era of Ottawa basketball that was so dominant. Yeah, we go through Vic's whole career, and honestly, you know what? It's a good chat because I really got to know this guy over the last couple of months, especially, living with him in Ottawa. Regardless, let's just hop into it. This is Greels. I'm your host, Robert Greeley. Enjoy. All right, I'm actually stoked for tonight and this episode. Honestly, man, I was just thinking, you know what? Maybe we should just put the mic on a coffee table and put on an episode of New Girl and see what kind of conversations we can have.
Yeah, just all you're missing is a few Nespresso coffees and we're good to go.
Yeah. So for context with that, me and Vic were roommates there back in the fall for a couple of months. How good was I as a roommate? You can rate me 1 to 10 now. I'm all the way in Newfoundland, so I can't fight you on it.
I would say a solid eight to nine. Like you cleaned up after yourself. Like you weren't that's really all for me is that's all that matters. Like, are you messy or are you not? And like, I'm not perfectly clean, but like in the kitchen and stuff, I try to be. And like, I thought you were the same. Like there's no time where I'm like, oh, Rob's leaving his stuff everywhere. Although you left your laptop on the living room table a few times too many, but other than that, I was like, that's so minor.
Yeah, that's that, man. I'll try and cop out on that. That was where the good Wi-Fi is. I'm uploading things so many times.
No, for sure. Like I said, I mean, like from this work from home environment, I was like only in the living room at night, really. So like it's all like minor things.
Okay, so anybody who wants to have me as a prospective roommate in the future, I will be attaching this little clip as a part of my application.
Always get good conversations too. That should be an added bonus. That's like
Yeah.
what pushes. That's what makes the minor inconveniences better.
I appreciate that, but yeah, I think you know what, it's really important in my opinion for people to kind of have the conversations that we had, man, because we got into everything, and like there was a lot of times where like I made you think in a different perspective, and like you made more so than not, like you made me think of it in a whole different perspective on like a wide variety of things. Obviously, when we were there, the US election was a big thing in the news and things of that nature, right? And I do really think it's important, to just kind of have somebody in your life that you have those types of conversations with, and you just learn so much more.
Yeah, I fully agree. And like you coming from like a small town out east, like I got a new perspective of why like it is harder to reach those people about certain I guess controversial, not even controversial topics, but like topics that they're not used to hearing. And like although you're very open minded, obviously, and like a lot of people aren't, but it was cool to hear your like you grew up in those same like areas and like you were open minded, you explained why they are, and like so it's like really good for me because now I can learn like how do I navigate that territory, how do I talk to people that way without just shunning them out, them shunning me out right off the bat, so I don't even get to have that conversation, right? So you can always learn. And it's just I honestly like I learned a lot. I found in those 2 months.
Yeah, no, man, it was a lot of fun, and like I gotta say, like it was. I do think for the most part we always agreed on a lot of things, so it would have been interesting to maybe even throw in a third party who who didn't agree with us as much. But yeah,
Yeah,
same for me, man. I learned so much, especially even just like the technicalities of the U.S. government, because obviously you're a lot more into that than I was at that moment, because obviously you got family down there as well.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, with my family there, and honestly, it's just more exciting than Canadian politics. So, like, yeah, but with family down there, I'm much more invested than like probably the normal Canadian, and it matters because like I'm not sure if I'll be down there sooner than later, and like if I want to raise a family there, like there's some serious issues that are going, like also those serious issues happen in Canada too. So I don't want to say it's a U.S. alone problem, but I am deeply invested in it, and also I think when the U.S. is in a good place, the rest of the world is, and they're not, and the rest of the world isn't. So I think it's a
No,
little correlation there.
100%. And I'm really glad for like our time as roommates, because now I'm just like I was always aware, but now I'm actively like listening and like going into everything, right? Like I mean, the Daily is like probably my number one podcast now, where like my mornings just start with like from the New York Times, like a 45-minute hash out of like what's going on, whether it's like what's happening in Georgia with like the politics, or obviously, storming the Capitol and things of that nature.
Yeah, no, that's a good idea. I should maybe start doing that too instead of just reading all the time.
I like it because I can just kind of crush it out on my commute, or like if I've been running a lot, man. This 2021 is different for me. I'm talking like 4 miles a day, so I just toss
Oh
it in, and
wow,
that's kind of what I've been listening to.
good for you, man. That's awesome. I'm at like 3 kilometers a day, and then
Okay.
like my shins just give out. I'm like, I'll slowly get there.
But let's kind of dive into basketball and like your childhood. So like, take me through that when you first really started developing the love for the game, and just how you were growing up and transitioned into that sport.
Yeah, like so when I grew up in Ottawa, when I was 6, I moved to Visalia, which is in California. My dad owns a farm out there, or owned a farm out there. And when you move to a new place when you're young, your parents just want you to meet new people, try to get involved. So they just put me in every single sport. So I did swimming, soccer, basketball. I even played inline hockey while I was in California because there's no skating rinks where I was. And like I basically just did everything. And then I think what happened was when you're 6 years old, and how tall was I? I think I was like like just under 5 feet. I think I was like 4'11"
Oh
at
wow.
like 6 years old. So I was just taller than everyone. The nets are like 7.5 feet, and like I was just better because I was taller. And I think when you get early success in something, you really stick to it. And like to be honest, hockey was my first love. Like I always dreamt about like being in the NHL. Just growing up in Ottawa, that's all you talk about. The Sens. My parents are
Mhm.
big Sens fans. So like when I moved to California, like I became a Colorado Avalanche fan because I got all the games, and I was just like on it until my uncle was a Steelers Penguins fan, which we can get into later. But yeah, so like it was a height thing, and then also just bigger in basketball in the States is huge, especially in California. And that was like prime Lakers dynasty with Shaq and Kobe, right? I moved there in 2000, so that was the beginning of the 3 years. So it just like picked up, and then when I came back to Ottawa when I was 12, I didn't realize how like unimportant basketball was. But it like I just kept playing, and I think it was when I was about 16, it clicked that like, hey, I could maybe play this at the university level, and like I should probably like choose: do I get a part-time job or do I train? Like my mom kind of in a very nice way gave like the little ultimatum, like, hey, if you're not going to get a part-time job, you better get a scholarship because one way or the other, something needs to be paid. So yeah, it just like it was a fun experience. I got lucky. I got put onto some pretty good programs in Ottawa and got some great coaching from ex CIS players. So I think that really helped my game because I'm not very athletic for my height, and so if I didn't understand the game well enough, I don't think I would have made it. But because I got such good coaching at a young age, that's a big part of why I made it.
Yeah, because I was gonna ask, like, how are you developing your coordination at like 14, 15 years old? You're already like 5'10", 5'11".
Yeah, it was hard, man. So in grade 8, so I was 13 and I was 6'1", and I had size 15 feet. And I'm 6'8" now and I have size 15 feet. So they never grew again. But I was 6 inches shorter, 7 inches shorter, trying to learn how to run with these huge feet. And like I was tripping a lot. Like so it was hard, and like I didn't realize it was the feet. I didn't want to like it to be that like to be the excuse. But then like once I hit 19, 20 and started getting my coordination, and like I stopped tripping on my feet, I was falling for other reasons. Uh, like that really, I guess you don't realize you're uncoordinated in the moment, if that makes sense. Like you just don't get why you're falling, and like you think it's just an accident. So, but it was tough being like constantly growing. You're eating so much, you're never gaining weight. You're still getting like pushed around by smaller players because um, they're just stronger, center of gravity, things like that. So, but luckily, basketball does have other ways to make it easier for tall, skinny people.
Did you like were in high school? Were the chirps kind of classic? You're the tallest on the court, and guys were pushing you around. Did they really fire into you with the insults?
Um, my team won a lot in high school in both
Yeah.
club and high and like my actual high school team. So like the chirps didn't come as much as I thought they would, or as much as you would. Like when you're losing, you don't want to be that team that's like chirping. So like, and most of it would just be like we're from a small school nobody knows, or we're from Ottawa, and Ottawa is not supposed to be good at basketball. So like it was mainly from our city more than our appearances, because like a lot of 15-year-olds are tall and skinny playing basketball too. So I would just be like, hey man, look at yourself. Like, like, I'm not alone. I'm being tall and skinny. So that was so yeah, it was mainly like the chirps were like, I'll tell you really quick side stories. We went to, I want to say Baltimore for a tournament, middle of July, like 10th weekend, something like middle of July. And the ref comes up to me, he's just like, we have Ottawa guardsmen. And he's like, so like, is it snowing where you're from? I'm like, yeah, crazy thing. Like we passed the border and it stopped. And then he like kind of realized how dumb his question was, but I never got a call the rest of the game. So I probably shouldn't have said that.
Oh man, yeah, okay, yeah, July. That's I had to think about that for a second. I was like, wait a second, and then I'm like, oh yeah, obviously it's not snowing in July.
Yeah.
That one kind of got. I'll be in the same category as the ref there. That one kind of got
But
a little bit past
to
me.
be fair, like if we were in California and he asked that, I would be like, yes, no, it doesn't snow in July. But Baltimore gets snow. Like it was a 6 hour, 7 hour drive. Like it
Yeah,
wasn't like we crossed time zones or like even time zones.
that always blows my mind with the states though, and like how you can live a completely different life. Like if you're in California or like Florida, even like you're living a different life than like somebody in Michigan or like you said, Baltimore. And then you even got like Hawaii and Alaska. It's crazy.
Yeah. Forget those are states sometimes.
No, it's wild. Like you, like I have, we've chatted about this. I got family in Bakersfield, California, and like, she doesn't own a winter coat. And one time they had like a centimeter of snow, and my aunt was the only one who showed up to work that day, right?
Yeah.
Whereas, on the, you go midway in the country, and now all of a sudden, like people are getting dumped with like 6, 7 feet of snow.
And they're just like, oh, this is
Yeah.
life.
So when you started the, commitment process and you're, being recruited, obviously, big frame, like a lot of schools are, probably looking at you. What was really on your mind as like, here's what an institution needs to have for me to go there?
Yeah, so actually like I wasn't recruited heavily until like I already kind of made my decision. So I was pretty much a late bloomer in terms of like grade 12. I never had a plan to grade 13, which sometimes confuses coaches. They think you have a second year, so they won't like reach out to you, things like that. But I wouldn't say that was the reason people didn't reach out to me. I was like unranked in the top 100 list to start the year, and then like I had a really so Coach Jimmy of University of Ottawa, he took over that year. So he had just taken over, I think, 2 months before my like started my grade 12 year. Um, so like it was really Carleton kind of gave the we'll see what our other commits say and then we'll come talk to you. And then because that's I was playing for Carleton's club program at the time. And then Coach Jimmy reached out pretty early in like October, and he was the only one. I reached out to everybody else before that, and nobody, and like only with U of T kind of responded. They were interested, but I didn't have the grades to get into their program. And then McGill, just because he used to be the coach of U Ottawa, he knew who I was, so he responded. So it was really like just Coach Jimmy for the first 3 months, like texting me every day. And like this guy's pretty young at the time. He was like 33. So I really connected with him. And like he's just like wanted to have fun. He's like, hey, we're gonna like win a lot of games once I build my like program here. I just took over. And he's like, and you're gonna have fun. So I was like, okay, those two things sound pretty good as a 17-year-old. And then I went to a tournament, like one of the biggest tournaments in Toronto with my high school, and I played really, really well. And then I started getting some other coaches to uh, reach out to me. And actually, a few coaches I reached out to originally who never responded. So I was like, that's ironic. Like,
Yeah, it's always
so yeah, I was. And like, I will say Roy Rana, who's now the assistant coach for Sacramento Kings. He was the coach of Ryerson at the time. He's Indian as well. So he reached out to me. I think this is the most honest 2 minute conversation I've ever had in my life. He's like, hey, I have a stud freshman who plays your position. He's starting. Would you still be interested? I was like, oh, thanks for the honesty, but like he's 1 year ahead of me. I can't say, oh, that's fine. He's like, I just want to reach out. I like seeing other Indians do well. And then, like, completely honest, never lied, like told it straight as it was when like conversation ended there. But ever since then, like him and I have always been good whenever we played each other. So like that was kind of cool. But I guess the key things like it's hard for me because I didn't have a lot of choice.
Okay.
So like Coach Jimmy was just there from the start, and everything he said were things I did believe in. Like he wanted to have fun. I knew I didn't want to play pro post university, and I told him that. I also told him my grades mattered to me and like things like that. So he said he was good with all that, and he actually was throughout the whole 5 years. If I ever missed practice for a midterm or studying, he never really gave me a hard time. Obviously, I had to pick and choose. We had a big game, like you gotta obviously have to figure out your balance of your commitments. But I think the biggest thing was just like, does he have your best interest at heart, and trying to figure that out. And then also realizing, I think a lot of 17, 18-year-olds make this mistake. Just look at the roster and you can see if they're lying to you just based on that. Like Coach Jimmy, I think he only promised me like 10 to 15 minutes my first year. And the two starting bigs were graduating. So like that kind of made sense. I'm like, yeah, there's minutes available. I also heard some coaches like one coach was telling one of my old teammates at high school, he's like, oh, you can get 25 minutes a game. And he has two starting point guards who aren't graduating, averaging like 30 minutes a game each and like scoring 15, 17 a game. And he's just like, I don't see how that's possible. Like they're actually good. You know what I mean? So
It's like, hey
yeah,
man, mathematically, this doesn't, something's got to give here.
yeah, right. So like, I think like trying to figure out if a coach is honest, because if a coach is honest, if you can figure that out in the recruitment stage, that helps you so much. And then you just know he has your best interest at heart. And like I would say, Coach Jimmy, like even basketball related, but more importantly, non-basketball related, always has every player's best interest at heart. And even post graduation, he set me up with recruiters uh, in terms of like actual jobs, not basketball. He set me up with like he did everything as possible to help me get a job. He wrote my like acceptance or recommendation letter for my master's. So like I give him all the credit in the world. He was honest to me in our recruiting time, and then he also like played through on it. Like, yeah, we may have our disagreements about other things, but they're all minor compared to like the main principles. So I would say those would be like the two things I would look at. Another thing would just be to look at is like look at the facility. Unfortunately, U Ottawa does not have a good facility, so I'm not helping Coach Jimmy on this one. But like, if I think I would have thought about that a bit more, I might have like thought about U Ottawa a little less. But I have zero regrets about like choosing man. Like the good news is when you're at U Ottawa, whenever you go on the road, it's like a home game because everything's better. The facilities are better. The guest change room's better than your own change room. So it's like and then when teams come to us, they're so shocked at how like bad our facility is. They're just like, where do we go to shower? I'm like, oh, with everybody else. And they're like, wait, what? So yeah.
The home court advantage is it's a mystery sometimes in how it works. It's actually super cool to hear about those early conversations you had with Coach Jimmy and him being like, "Hey, listen, man, I'm building my program and we're going to win a lot of games," which I mean, you guys certainly did. When you get in the door though, that first year is probably, statistically maybe the most like unsuccessful year collectively as a team that you guys have during
Yeah.
your 5 years. What do you think really attested to your rookie season? And then, looking at the bigger picture of, did that set the foundation to really, start winning some medals and getting national appearances?
Yeah, that's actually a great intro question because that first year was the key to the success we had our whole 5 years. So we had a fourth year star named Warren Ward, and he played for like the Canada FISU team, and he's on the Pan Am Canada team, and like just a stud. And so he was supposed to be our veteran, like leadership and like star player. And then we just coach brought in his first recruiting class, and then he also had Johnny and Gab returning as second year guys. So it was like supposed to be the recruiting class, those two guys, and a few fourth, fifth year guys that were gonna like really push us to have like we never. I wouldn't say my first year we thought we were gonna win, but we like thought we were gonna win, you know. And then I had a pretty good preseason. Like Mike had a good preseason. We all played really well. And then like unfortunately teams get tape on your rookies. So then like we started to struggle a little. And Warren really carried us through first semester. And like we finished 4-4. Warren and Johnny were like our two best players by far. And then first game of winter semester, Warren tears his ACL. And then my minutes at that point, I think like the last 5 games at that point, I was playing like 2 to 3 minutes a game. Like I was almost out of the rotation because I just wasn't playing good basketball. And um, it changed that moment because I think Coach Jimmy just made it a full like, hey, we're not winning this year. It's over. Let's get our young guys ready. So then he just went like I started playing like 25 minutes a game. Mike was playing like 32. Johnny was 30. Gab was 30. It's just like let's get all these young guys as many minutes as possible and let's be ready for next year when Warren comes back from his ACL injury. And like those valuable, like to be a first and second year guy, to be in a game with 4 minutes left and it's like a 10-point game or whatever, like within 10, like those are just invaluable experiences. And to get that experience when it didn't matter, but in your head it matters, right? Like in the grand scheme of things, it didn't matter. But in that moment, I wanted to win that game more than anything. So like to get those types of experiences was just invaluable. And like it's something that unfortunately, once you become a good program, you can never really do that again. So like your first and second year guys will never get those types of experiences unless they're really good and should be playing, right? So we got that kind of fortunate. I don't think I was like per se better than all the fourth or fifth year guys at that time, but I think Coach Jimmy just committed that hey, like we need to build for next year and for the next 4 years. So he took we lost some games we might have won if he would have played the older guys a bit more, but in the long term, we got a lot of medals out of it.
Yeah, that's for sure. And no, it makes a lot of sense, right? Like if you have like that well-established program, like I mean, when you think of, great youth sport programs in the sense, like Western as a rookie with football, you're not coming in and really, starting right away. You look at Carleton, Ottawa, like the basketball powerhouses, like yeah, if you want to establish yourself as a rookie, you honestly probably have to be one of the better ones in the country at that position.
Yeah, you're probably a borderline D1 guy, in all honesty. If you're going to an Ottawa, Carleton, Ryerson, Calgary, and you're starting off the bat, you probably were very close to going to like a mid-major or higher D1, and you just chose not to go to a low-end D1 that nobody's heard of, and you chose to stay in Canada. That's like, in my opinion, that's the only way you're cracking the starting lineup on one of those teams.
So now in that second year, you get to the OUA finals. What are you thinking ahead of that game? Because I'm assuming it's the powerhouse Carleton.
Yeah, yeah. So we played them twice before that season. We lost them in Capital Hoops by 5, and then we lost to them in triple overtime to end the season by like 2. So I think it was like what was it? We lost by 3. It was like it went down each time. So we lost by 4, and then we lost by 3 in the overtime one. Then we lost by 2 in the semi or the OUA finals. So like going into that game, I didn't really care about it to be honest, and which is a bad thing to say because like we locked up nationals, and the next week I knew we were going to. It was in Ottawa, and I knew we were going to have to probably play Carleton again. So I'm like, it would be nice to win. Obviously, I wasn't like going, but I was like, this in big picture. I was like, if we lose, the world's not over.
Mm-hmm.
But we actually like I played pretty well. I remember I think I had like 10 or 12 first half points. I was actually playing super well. Warren was playing well. Johnny was playing well. We were right in it. And we ended up losing. Warren missed a 3 at the buzzer to send it to overtime. And we ended up losing or to win actually. And we ended up losing by 2. And I remember I left that game with a lot of confidence, thinking like, hey, if we can play them at nationals, like we can win this all. Like to beat someone you're this even with 4 times in a row, it's very hard. Um, with that said, we didn't win it all, obviously, but it was a weird. Like I always found the OUAs really weird. You just wanted to win the semis. They brought you together for this 4-game final, and the semis is all that mattered because then you get to nationals, and you knew you could only beat. That's such a weird thing to say. You probably can't beat Carleton twice in 2 weeks, so you're kind of like, let's pick our time. And so I thought second year, I was like, we're right there. We believe we didn't get blown out, which is the perfect scenario. And I was like, if we get them at nationals, like I was very confident in our chances.
That's so true, though. I mean, that Ravens basketball team, like you very much like what you said, like you're not beating them twice in a run of a week. Like if they come out of a loss, how they game plan and readjust is one of the most impressive things. And I think it's honestly the most underrated aspect of how good that team is in that organization.
Yeah, and when you're that good, you get complacent with wins, right? So a loss just shakes you out of that, right?
Mhm.
So like once again, as weird as it say, it's like you just don't want to like get them, like have them fully ready when they should, like if they can't be, right? So it's like you don't ever want to throw a game, but like you got to be strategic about when you win. And like I thought Coach Jimmy did some great things, and like every time we would play, not showing everything because he knew like the goal was always to play them in the national finals. So like keeping a couple things hidden. Obviously, he wouldn't like coach to lose the game, but like that's part of the strategy, which is a weird thing to say.
Well, it's like what they say, right? It's chess, not checkers.
Yeah, exactly.
So now you get to nationals in your second year. It's your first time. What are you thinking upon that tournament? How are you preparing mentally? What are some of your goals that you're setting? Obviously, you want to come out of it with a national championship, but there's always subcategories within that.
Yeah, man, I played horribly. If I remember correctly. I think against McGill, I don't know if I scored. Against Lakehead, I think it was like a minus 15. I don't know. Like, thank you, Coach Jimmy, for letting me learn. But I don't think the first two games, like, I can't remember them, which is weird. And we won. No, we lost the semis. Sorry. But the McGill game, like, I remember Caleb came off the bench and played amazing. He hadn't really played all season. So I'm like, okay, like, Caleb's going to be the real deal when this, like, comes through. He was like 17 at the time too, and he's like hasn't played basically all season. We're in nationals, and he comes up and becomes a hero. Against Lakehead, we were up 10 in the fourth, and we blew it. And like, there's a couple of sequences where I remember where it's like we fouled someone on a three, they hit an and one, like we crumbled. And like it's something like, right. I think your brain tries to push that image out because like I can't remember plays in that game, and I can tell you plays like exactly from like good games, you know what I mean, from first year. But for some reason, like those games just get pushed out of your memory.
Well,
And then like
you almost need to do that to be able to perform, right? So it's like you have that short-term memory so you can bounce back and regroup in the next game so you don't hold on to those memories as much, right? And then, when we're reflecting on it like 6-7 years later, it's just non-existent.
yeah, that's a good point. It's a very good point. So yeah, and then I think the worst thing CIS basketball, or I guess U Sports basketball does, is the bronze medal game. Like it was three of our fifth year guys. Like that semifinal loss was their last like meaningful game of their career. So like we're crying in the change room. Like we're sad. We blew a 10-point lead. It's not like we lost a game we shouldn't have won. So it hurts even more when you lose when you were up, like in like those situations. And I just remember like I was like, I have to play a game tomorrow. And I remember the first half. The only reason why I remember this game very well is because I was playing Sean, who's my high school teammate. So he went to Acadia, and we're playing each other for the bronze medal game. We've been teammates since like grade 7. And I remember I was like 0 for 7 to start the game. And at halftime, as we're walking to our change room, Sean's like, "Whoa, not a good start for you, buddy." Like gives me a little pat, and then we like walk away, whatever. And then I came on the second half. I ended up scoring like 16 points in the second half, like completely redeemed. I think that kind of just like shot my confidence back up for the following nationals because I wasn't playing well and I knew it. And I was like, man, is this moment like too big for me? I was like, it's never been too big. I don't know why. There's not even that many people here. I think it was like 4 or 5,000. So I was just like, yeah, I was like, okay. I think I just like, and I think I think playing against Sean just kind of brought familiarity into it. And like, then from there, like my takeaways were it's just basketball. And I think if I would have always just gone with that mentality, like maybe the Nationals could have gone differently. Or at least for me personally. I don't know if as a team it would have.
Sean patting you on the back there, telling you it's not a good start. That was your Michael Jordan, and I took that personally moment.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, can't let this guy outdo me.
So I guess you win the bronze. What's the mentality? Or is it like a silver lining in a way, or are you still pretty much like you can't enjoy it because you're still defeated from the semis?
The celebration of winning the bronze, I think, is probably the best celebration we had as a
Wow.
team. It's also like my sister being a psychologist, she always says like whoever finishes second always feels shittier because you either ended with a loss or you were closer to bronze gold. So like even in a track race, bronze is just happy to get a medal, right? Because the other option was fourth.
Yeah.
So I think like we got to end our season with a win. Only two teams get to say that, the gold medalist and the bronze. Obviously, it wasn't gold, but like to just like let Warren, Jordan, and Demetrius walk off with a win, for us to go that night and celebrate like the season's over. Like there was no other time in my season that ended with a win. My career, no other season that ended with a win. So and like then you're excited. You're like, hey, we were just one game away from at least being in that finals. Like, who knows what happens in the finals? So like, I honestly, I think that bronze win was very big for us. And Coach Jimmy also played the seniors, so it was like we won, and like some of our seniors weren't big minute guys; they're like 5 to 10. So with these guys getting their last game, actually getting to play 15, 20 minutes, and we still won. Like it's just like everything went well in that game. Like those guys got to play. We all played well as young guys, and we won. Like you couldn't have asked for a better ending minus a gold.
No, 100%. It's one of those nice little cap offs where, everything kind of goes the way that it should, right? And, you roll out and now, you're gearing up for another season because it's not your last season. And now, this is where you guys eventually finally get to the national final. You win the OUA conference as well. Take me through that season because, that was potentially a big year. And, maybe looking back on it, the best chance to really have that national title over Carleton.
Yeah, I would say that was our most talented team by far. I don't know if it was the best chance to win because Carleton, I think that was also their best team they had in the 5 years. So
Okay.
it just kind of worked perfectly. Like our best year was their best year, and it's just great games. Like when we played them, we got a transfer named Terry Thomas from Santa Fe. He's an All Canadian there. Only played one semester with us, and he has a 5 minute highlight dunk tape on YouTube just from 12 games, which in youth sports is unheard of. He was just absolutely, just such a good basketball player. And it was just, when we won gold, it was, I know how I said last time, you want to pick your battles. And like
Mhm.
in hindsight, like I would obviously swap those weekends in a heartbeat, but I wasn't like we can't beat these guys again because it also gave us confidence we could. And there was like 2 or 3 key plays in the finals that really swung the game. And I thought I truly believed we were gonna win the whole game the whole time until like a couple plays that kind of swinged it. So the mentality was a little weird because we won gold, and then unfortunately that same weekend we won OUA. The U Ottawa hockey team had their incident in Lakehead, so we just kept getting prepped for all these interview questions that were never going to happen. Like I think we had to sit in an hour meeting. We're like, if they ask you about hockey, like, how do you answer? And like the answer is like, this is not relevant to us. I'm like, okay, we don't need an hour for this. And then secondly, not one person asked a question about the hockey team. Like CIS, U Sports isn't big enough, or they're going to cross those kind of questions. So I felt like that really took away from our actual focus, and it wasn't from the media; it was from our own school that kind of took away our own focus. And like being in nationals were again in Ottawa and all that, so it was like it was. I thought that was a little like I'm not frustrated that the hockey team event happened. I'm frustrated with how administration handled it, that it became a distraction on us. But with that said, like um, nationals is just fun. So like once you get into it, like you forget about everything else. You forget about everything. So it was a little heartbreaking not to win that year because that was probably our most talented team we had. But like the silver medal, when you look back at it, it's better than nothing.
Yeah, no, 100%. Those, moments in particular, it's just like you see in the moment, everybody's so frustrated with like a silver medal and, things of that nature. But fast forward 5 years, the wound heals, and there's a lot of pride in those particular moments. It was funny enough because I was listening last night to Blake Griffin's. He did a podcast episode, and he was talking about Doc Rivers' mentality in terms of like when it comes to playoffs and things of this. And he was essentially, it's a box, and everything, like the only thing when it comes to playoff time that's allowed in your box is family, and then everything else like friends and any other distractions are, you know exited out. Like it's not a thing. Obviously, you're mentioning that like you Ottawa is sitting you guys down and addressing an issue that didn't happen within your team in particular, but another group. So how are you trying to combat that in those moments?
Yeah, it was hard. I'm not gonna lie because we were curious. Like, what happened? What is the truth? Like, and At U Ottawa, the basketball team doesn't practice anywhere near the hockey team. So I personally didn't know anyone from the hockey team. So I couldn't reach. It's kind of weird if you just reach out in this moment and say, "Hey, man, what happened?" Right? So,
Hmm.
and I think that was a common trend with all the basketball players. Like we just didn't know anyone on the hockey team because we don't practice. Like we practice 10-minute walk away from each other, and yeah, and they're all most of them are French too. So they're all in French programs, and we're all English. So just like it was there. So like I think the curiosity is what kind of got us because we were all kind of like, what's going on? And we kind of wanted truth. But like, yeah, so I think that was hard. And like, yeah, exactly what you said about the box. Like, Coach Jimmy mentioned that like, I think one time he watched like some SEAL Team 6 movie and he like showed the quote. And the guy was super right. He's like, when they're going on these top secret missions, he's like, hey, make sure your financials are checked, your family's good, groceries are there, and all that. Cause like, you can't have anything else on your mind around these missions or we will fail, right? So it's the same. I think that's exactly what Doc Rivers is trying to say. Is just like, hey, if we're not just focused on everything in this box, we will lose. And I I wouldn't say that's the reason we lost, but I wouldn't say that helped, right? So like it just was an extra distraction on something we probably shouldn't have to have worried about because no reporter was asked us, and like it's just the Ottawa Citizen mainly and a few small basketball beat art writers, right? So I think we over prepped for those moments, and I think they also didn't have enough trust in us to not say something that we didn't know the answers to. Like
Hmm.
I wasn't gonna be like, hey, they're all guilty. Like I don't know. I'm not gonna say they're all innocent. I don't know. I would just be like, I don't know what happened. Like it just happened. And so yeah, I thought that was a little difficult.
Blake had an interesting point when I was listening to Blake Griffin what he had to say too, because in terms of like that box and that mentality, and what was interesting was the fact of he was basically just like, I play like 82 games in a regular season and I prepare for it in a much more like relaxed and different way. And now all of a sudden playoffs are around and I'm changing my routine and I'm acting completely different. And like, yeah, it's a different monster and a different animal. But for myself, it's just like, okay, like I don't understand. Like now, shouldn't I be doing the same, like what I've been doing all season long? I'm curious of your take and opinion on that.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point because like so we would first week of playoffs always coincided with reading week. So we would have the first week of playoffs, like we usually had the bye, so we didn't play on the Wednesday night, and we would just watch so much film, like a ridiculous amount of film. And I don't think we practiced anymore. We just had like in the morning a light individual and then our normal practices. So at school, with school it's a little, but I agree because like one mistake we made in my fourth year was we hosted OUA Final Four and we chose to play at 6 instead of 8. We're always used to playing at 8, and we ended up losing to Windsor, who we beat without Mike like 3 weeks before that, and then we returned Mike and lost at home, and we beat them at Windsor after a 10-hour drive. But you know what I mean? So it's like
Yeah.
I fully see what Blake's saying because I thought in that moment we chose a 6 o'clock game, I thought it was a mistake. Like we're used to playing at 8. Like those things I think matter. I think how you prep your body like should stay the same. If not, doing more usually isn't like doing more therapy usually isn't a bad thing. But I don't think you should do more work. Like you should not lift more than you did. You should not shoot more than you did. You shouldn't practice more than you did. Like I think those things should all remain the same. I think this should just be more focused. Like you shouldn't let as like a much time be wasted with like things that are unimportant in those moments. So I agree with Blake on certain things, but I would say like on others, it's going to be more intense. It's playoffs. Like this is where coaches lose jobs. This is where players lose their legacy, right? So, yeah, I think at certain point you have to expect some things are going to be way more intense.
Hmm. Yeah, it's because the thing is too is it's like the other thing that's just not manageable, and we're like with whatever game and stuff like that, like for every one playoff game, that's like 8 or 10 regular season games. So like just physically and mentally, there's no way that you can hold that type of intensity over the course of such more abundance of matches.
Yeah, your players will burn out if you try to be that intense all the time.
Hmm.
Yeah,
So
and I
that
thought Coach. I was gonna say I thought Coach Jimmy did a great job in like playoffs and stuff to like give us more breaks. than to like kind of work. He just wanted us to get more shots. That was his
Yeah.
thing, but it wasn't more actual hard bang on practice.
Okay. So now, bringing into the, you have that unfortunate end to the season. It's a silver lining, it's a silver medal. Now you go into the next season, you get back there for a second year, another chance at the national title. The mindset's got to be different at that point now, right? You're either a little bit more stressed because you didn't get it done the year before, you're a little bit more motivated because you didn't get it the year before. Where's your headspace at?
Yeah, so I'll just like when we lost the first silver, I remember like and the first thing I thought about lost the first gold and won silver. I remember I sat in the locker room. I just thought about everything that had to go right for us to get there. Like who we played in the playoffs, how we hosted the home game, like the playoff games, who we beat along the road, like who we got at nationals to beat Saskatchewan. They knew Vic, and like those were hard fought games. I think we won by like we were up 30 against UVic in the second quarter, and we ended up winning by like 5. Like they just made a steady comeback the whole way, and I was just like, man, like everything went right, and like, will we ever get back here again? Even though we were returning everyone but Terry, I was like, I generally was like, wow. And then everything just went right again, minus like we got an OUA bronze instead of OUA gold. And like we got right back to where we were. And um our mindset was, hey, last year the mistake was we played the 8 p.m. game. Well, it's not our choice, but we played the 8 p.m. game Saturday, and we had nationals and the finals the next day. It's like at 2 or 1:30, and it somehow ends up on the weekend where you spring forward, so you're losing an hour of sleep. And so we thought we had this figured out this time. Okay, we know it's springing forward. Like, get your rest, get your ice. But this year, nationals, the Ryerson, when we played Ryerson in the semis, the game was at 8:30 p.m., so it was a half an hour later, and we sprung forward again. And I remember like I looked at my clock, it was like 1:30. I'm okay, let's go to bed. I looked at my clock again, it was like 3:30. I'm like, oh no, like I'm not gonna get any sleep tonight. You're just so fired up. You're gonna play in the national finals. Like you can't calm down within 2 to 3 hours. And yeah, it was just but even with all that said, when I like the ball got tipped and all that, I was like, hey, we have a good shot here. Like they're just as tired as we are. Maybe like they got an extra hour to 2 hours of sleep, but like that's about it. And we just laid an egg. Like we got absolutely destroyed, and like they led from the minute the game tipped off. And I think it's just like a collective of things. Like Johnny's knee was not healthy. We like limped to the finish line. Like we weren't playing our best basketball at the end. And I think that's one thing we were missing from my second and third year. We played our best basketball in February. And
Mm-hmm.
like that's kind of what reminded me of the Buffalo Bills right now. Like they're playing their best football like right now, and that's all that matters. And we weren't. We were just more skilled than the other teams that we could get by. Like we were down 10 to Ryerson and a half, and I hit 4 like 3 of them pretty miraculous threes in the third quarter to like 5 to get us back into that game and stuff. So it's just I don't think we deserved to win that year, and but it still hurts. Like in the moment, you're not thinking that way. You're just thinking like, man, everything went right 2 years in a row, and we lost both times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like at the end of the day, it's so true. Nobody cares unless you win the last game of the season, basically, right? Like you can if you're getting in the playoffs with like a maybe a par like or like a 500 record or like maybe just above 500 and you're getting into the playoffs and then all of a sudden you bring your best basketball or whatever sport it is and you walk out as a championship every single year, nobody's going to care and reflect on like, oh well, like there were points in the season where they were losing 8 games. They're champs. Like
Yeah,
that noise goes away so quickly.
I think LA Kings, like the 8th seed in like
Mm-hmm.
2010 or whatever, is the best example. And then all of a sudden they start a dynasty. They go from being like mediocre for many years, and all they need was one run. And then you just get this confidence, you get this swagger about yourself. Like I think like you see it all the time. Like the Chiefs, they win a Super Bowl last year. They go 15 and or 14-2. I think they lost their last week.
Yeah, they
But
lost.
like
That was a weird. They lost to the Jags late, like the last week.
yeah,
It was a weird one, but
but they rested everybody. So
mm-hmm.
like it's just a certain type of swagger you get once you win, right? And like it doesn't matter. Like yeah, you're completely right. It's just like it's all irrelevant at the end. Like I think we lost my fourth year 3 games. Like, but that doesn't matter. We came silver. Like, you didn't win it all. Like, if you say you only lost 3 games and won, that's kind of cool, But
Yeah.
we only lost three, but one of them was the big one.
It's when you look at it all, right? Like athletes' careers are always measurable in how many championships, what was the real impact in terms of, overall team success. Okay, you had the numbers, yeah, you had good regular season records, but like when it all kind of came down to it, what were the numbers, what were the championships, what did you kind of leave with in terms of gold medals, right? And yeah, like you mentioned the Kings as like a winning example, but then like you look at how now insignificant that Warriors, what was it, 72-10 or whatnot? Like the
72, 73-9.
yeah, so like the best regular season record ever, but they didn't finish it with a ring, right? So it's one of those where it's just okay, it's like tainted. Like it was,
Yeah.
leading into that finals, there was so much conversation about this could be like one of the greatest teams of all time now, right? And now that conversation pretty much just dissolves.
Yeah. I think like in the moment, it's exactly what you said about the 73-9, and it's like they're not winners. Like
Mhm.
it's the same thing I kind of think about ourselves. In the moment, I was like, we didn't win. Like that's why we all came here. That's what we all said. It's like national championship, and we didn't get it. But then when you look back at it, there's more to it. Like that's probably the best 4 year run U Ottawa has ever had in basketball, and
Yeah.
may ever have. There, unless a team gets a championship, that's the only thing that can pass that 4 year run. I think we had the most wins. Um, like each season we were breaking our previous season's record for wins and like win percentages, points per game. Like we were just breaking records. We broke CIS records for like most threes made by a team in a season, most threes in a game. I think we had like 25 one game or 27, something like that against York. Like when you look back at it, those because you can put a program's history as one thing. I think I look at it from that lens instead of a U Sports lens because Carlton's just dominated, right?
Yeah.
So we're not the only program who can say we've lost to Carlton in multiple national finals, right? That's happened to a couple other programs, and then no other program except like three have won a championship in the last 15 years. So that kind of like takes away if you don't win, it's not a big deal, which is once again a really bad mindset, but it is the mindset. And so then it kind of just takes into a program view. And I'm like, we broke every Gee-Gee record for basketball there. We have the best finish times three. Like we have the best for winning percentage. We have all those things. Like I think Mike and I are tied for most wins by Gee-Gee in their career because we just played the same amount of games. So it's just like those kind of things is where I kind of hold my hat instead of on a big picture U Sports.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Obviously, it's a very different league than like what we're chatting about with the NBA because I mean, you're seeing so many different teams win championships, right? But when a program has such a stranglehold and it's like, you look back on it and it's 15 of the last like 18 like runs of like 8 or 10, like that doesn't really happen. That can't really happen in the pros once you implement
No.
salaries and obviously more longevities in the season and things of that nature.
Yeah, and a good example is Bama and Clemson. Like nobody holds in Ohio State. Nobody
Mhm.
holds it against USC, Oregon, any of those guys right now for not winning championships. Right? They're just like they're not on their own standard of what Oregon and USC should be, and that's all they're being held to, right? So because just you can't compete with the Bamas and like so it's exactly like what you're saying. It's like you just got to find I guess different levels to like put yourself up as a program or in your career.
USC is actually doing a really good job of that. And I think that their new implementation of this essentially it's a studio where it's basically players have access to now grow their personal brand based off of like USC videographers and photographers. They're basically going to get professional grade like video and promo and all that to grow their own brand because obviously now you have like California being allowed for NCAA players to make their likeness.
Yeah.
Obviously, I do think, Bama and Clemson can quickly rival what they just implemented there, but I do think that that's a big turning point for that program. And I'm thinking USC is going to be in the conversation more so now because they just landed that number one recruit in the country as well.
Yeah.
And I with that program in place, like I think that's a big step forward and a huge recruiting tool.
When USC is good, it's really good for college football.
Mhm.
Like, NCAA should be doing everything in their power to make USC always good. Just because, like, growing up in California, like I was there when Matt Leinart was the QB and they're winning championships, Rose Bowls, all this. California was buzzing, and like we don't realize like California is bigger, more populated than Canada. So if you can get California buzzing about a college football team where they're all wearing the jerseys, they're all wearing everything, like they're all doing this, like it's incredibly like it's just so contagious. Like I was just like naturally like watching USC games as an 11-year-old because I'm like everyone's wearing the jerseys. I didn't know a thing about football, and then I see like I think the third game I ever watched was the Vince Young Matt Leinart battle, and like it's historic, but like I didn't know a single thing about what was going on.
I'll take a step back from college football and just add on that whole point though, because when you're in a city and like the major teams are winning, life is fun. Like it's so cool to walk around. My first year ever in Ottawa was the year that the Red Blacks won the Grey Cup and the Sens made that super deep playoff run and like lost in the conference finals to Pittsburgh. That was like an incredible sporting year to just be a fan of sports in the city. Like I obviously like grew up in Newfoundland, so I didn't really have any ties to like the Sens or necessarily the Red Blacks. That was when I became a Red Blacks fan, just being in the city, and obviously you go on and you get to know those guys as well and like how they operate. So you obviously just kind of gravitate towards, that team. But yeah, like it's when the team, whatever major team is in your city, and if they're doing good, like there's flags, there's flags on restaurants, flags on like cars, people are honking at each other, like that. Those awesome like old Ottawa clips of everybody chanting Pajot on the train and OC Transpo, like man, life is good.
It is, man, and just unifies people. Like for 3 hours or for 3 weeks, like it doesn't matter what you do for a living, doesn't matter what school you went to, doesn't matter who you are. If you're wearing a Sens jersey, we're on the same team. And it's just like it's fun. It's fun to like cheer with a random stranger at a bar or like which sounds insane in COVID times. But about like Pajot scoring a hat trick against the Rangers or 4 goals, whatever it was, like and then chanting out Pajot, Pajot the whole time. I was like, I'm a Sens are my second favorite team. So like I was cheering up with for them up until they played Pittsburgh. But like that entire run was just so much fun. Even like as a Pittsburgh fan, just watching every time the Sens won, like everyone go on Elgin and like just start partying together on the middle of the street. Like it's fun, and that's all that really matters.
Yeah, no, 100%. Going into your last year now at U Ottawa, you cap it all off. OUA bronze medal. Probably not. I mean, it's never probably going to be the finish that you want unless you walk away with that national championship. But reflecting on the whole career as a whole, the dying seconds on the shot clock there, and the final buzzer goes off. Vic's career is done at U Ottawa. How are you feeling?
It was devastating. In the moment, you try to play because everyone like talks about how your fifth year, like how it's gonna be hard when it's done. So you try to like play it off like it's not hard, but it was hard. Like your whole life, when people say, "Oh, you're tall, do you play basketball?" The answer was yes. I'm like, "Oh yeah, actually, I play at the University of Ottawa." Like so it's like it's an easy conversation starter. And like that point, I was like, "Well, I used to," you know what I mean? So it's like, how do you like identify who you are when your whole life you've been a basketball player and athlete and all that? Like obviously that doesn't change overnight, but like technically not true anymore at the same time, right? And then at the same time, I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do for a living and like what I want to do for work and like is finance for me and like oh shit, I don't have any relevant work experience. So like that stress of that like also hits. Like unfortunately, like just being an athlete, you don't get to just be an athlete while you're in university and like you don't realize that either. So then like once that's done, you're like, oh, like I actually gotta like what's going on with my academics? Have I been doing well? Like luckily like I took that stuff decently seriously. But yeah, it's just it's hard because you gotta find new ways to like tell yourself who you are, right? Like basketball is gone. Like who am I? Like what other interests do I have? Can I talk about anything that's not basketball or sports related? Like you know what I mean? Like can like it was hard and also hard because I had my worst season in my career too. So it's just
Mhm.
like a mixture of like I did not play good basketball. Our team did the same thing. We peaked in like January. Then unfortunately Caleb, like I think he pulled or tore his quad, something that kept him out for a few weeks. And then he came back early to try to like make it for the end of our season. And we just never meshed because like you get like reintroducing a star player is not in. I think it's overrated or underrated how difficult that is. Like when these Kevin Durant's come back or Kyrie, like who's taking his like 6 game hiatus right now. When these guys come back, like that's a hard thing because other guys had higher roles. Now you got to deal with them. And, like you got to give them back their original minutes. And I think I don't know like how we could have done it better, but it just didn't work what we did. And so we just had a bunch of things that like were all in our head and like going to nationals, we weren't in a good place. And then it ends and you're just like, wow, that season was not how I imagined my season to end. And on top of that, my career is over. So it was two very difficult things to like grasp. Because like I said earlier, that third year team was our most talented team, but our fifth year team had the best chance to win by far. We beat Carleton both times that year in the regular season. We lost them in the OUA semis, but we would have had them in the national semis. But once again, against Dow, we blew a 10-point lead in the fourth. I think even in the last like 4 minutes. And like once again, you don't want your career to end like blowing a 10-point lead. Like we were losing the whole game and we lost, I think it would have been a little easier to handle. But like losing that game the way we did, the way our season ended, and then just basketball being over, like all that shit hits you all at one time, and you're just like, oh man, like now what am I doing with my life? So it was just like it was a lot.
Yeah, it's so much to handle, and it's crazy because when you identify as something for your whole life, and it's just like it's so easy to think fondly of it, and like when you look back on the old pictures, and it's like middle school you had a basketball under your arm, and then in high school you're wearing your varsity jackets and things of that nature, and you're talking about, oh, I might be going to this school, I might be going to that school, and then you go on and you play 5 years of like high intensity basketball and any sport, right? And then you get to a moment too where it's like you have to dedicate so much time to this craft that, like you said, now when the real world kicks in, okay, sometimes now this whole basketball card isn't necessarily going to grant me the opportunities in the workforce. So trying to navigate and figure out who I'm going to be is just becoming harder now because there's really been no other time to develop other interest. And it's like the thing too that you really hit the nail on the head with is like struggling with identity. And that's in like a lot of like career changes and things of that nature. I've honestly even felt it, since like graduating from like U Ottawa and like having such a predominant role with the football team there. It's like, even though I'm not a player, it's like I just, was constantly like, represented with that organization in mind. And like everything that I did, everybody was always asking me like, oh, like, where are you guys going this weekend? Or like, what are you doing this weekend? And it was always like, oh, football. And like that was like the friend group as well, and then like obviously with big games and moments of like the Panda game, and it's just like such a pinnacle, and like you have like 24,000 people just like screaming all the time, like the adrenaline rushes from all that, even like the home openers and the playoff games. Now you take all of that out and you try and like readjust after that being your norm for a certain period of time. It's like I struggle with like how can I replicate that high when like you really can't.
You can't, and the bigger thing is, I don't know if you should. You know what I mean? Like, should you be at your desk all hyped up and like, yeah, Excel? You know what I mean?
Woo,
And like,
let's go.
yeah, PowerPoints. Let's go add some images here. Like, you know what I mean? So it's like, I have to stop listening to rap music because I would just get fired up. I'd be like, yeah, let's go work out. Let's go play basketball. Let's go do this. So like, my response when I would listen to rap music was like, I just correlated that with basketball.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I have to stop listening to it because I can't be sitting at my desk and like be, oh, like, you know what I mean? So, yeah, sorry, go on.
No, I was like, because you said that, and I had it's completely different, but, and it's so funny. So, like with football, our road trips every weekend, we would always hit like a Sobeys or a Dominion or, dude, Loblaws. I've been in Newfoundland now. We don't have Loblaws anymore. So I'm like forgetting what it's called, but
That big one.
you, yeah. You go in and like, the first part of every road trip, 15 minutes, all of us would like storm into the grocery. For one, it's just a funny scene to see like 50 people all like pack up their carts for the weekend, and like you got some linemen grabbing like full rotisserie chickens, and like guys are grabbing like chicken strips and stuff like that, and it's to the point where like I'm not getting like fired up, but like when I go grocery shopping and I walk past that like hot food section, like man, I feel sad because I'm just like, oh, it's not the same without having like four of our linemen like stood in a line like waiting to get that stuff now. It's just like, oh, I'm an adult.
For sure. Like there's certain places in Toronto, like the Loblaws right next to Ryerson, like where whenever I go to, I just think about basketball because like that's where we
Mhm.
ate and like did all the things while we played Ryerson. So like, yeah, it's just certain things like just will always trip that memory and then like bring you back those feelings that like, oh yeah, this is like that time we did this, we did that, and like it just isn't the same doing it without that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How have you tried to like, deal and combat that like identity crisis essentially post basketball?
Yeah, I think one mistake I did was I tried to just completely get rid of basketball off the start. Or like I was like, I'm not gonna train, not gonna shoot, not gonna like lift as much. I think I just lifted.
Mhm.
And I was like, if I can just like go cold turkey, it'll be easier. And then I realized the easiest way to do it was just keep it in your life in small doses. Like then I joined the assistant coaching staff for like U Ottawa, and then while I've been working here as a management consultant, I had my own basketball team I was coaching. And like those things let you keep your old identity, but then they're not your main focus. And they let you try to develop new things and you meet new people and you just I think the biggest thing I should have tried to figure out was like what type of like I guess podcasts weren't really around then, so it was hard. But
Yeah.
like you kind of just had to figure out like what really piques your interest. Like what do you want to learn about? What do you want to be about? And like I realized finance wasn't for me, which was good. Figured out a little earlier than I guess always better to figure out eventually than never. Um and I think I just like I put my head down to like books and things like that and started reading and just trying to rediscover like what are my interests. And then once you figure out your interests, then you just run away with them, right? So it's like, as I think you said it earlier, like you just didn't have time to develop other interests when you're an athlete. I think that was the biggest thing, and I think that's a really good point. Like you didn't have time to develop any other interests, so go find out what they are, and then go and like put your energy there, put your time there. Like we know how as athletes we know how to time manage better than even athletes will think. Like, yeah, we may not study as much as we thought we should have or not, but we still did both and we still got degrees. So we found out how to be an athlete and we found out how to be a student. I bet maybe it wasn't a good student. But you know how to focus, you know how to like put your time and effort and how to become really good at something. And like that's a skill that not a lot of people have. And I think it's just like understanding that you have this skill that you can like put your mind to something and just become really, really good at it and like running away with that. And like it doesn't have to like and that interest doesn't have to be a profession off the start. Like for me, it was my I used to play a lot of chess with my dad. So I got back into chess and then Queen's Gambit came again, and now I got back into it again. But chess was really big for me, and I loved playing chess. So like I put a lot of time and effort in that, and then that just uses different parts of your brain. Where I'm like, okay, I like strategy. I want to do a job where I can talk strategy. So I was like, okay, let's go into management consulting. So I got my math, and it just like it pushed me into the right direction by taking one small step of hey, let's just get back into chess.
And it's crazy how quickly you can regain that career path, right? And it's just from simple moments of like reflecting on it now, but in the moment, it's just like, hey, if I take my time, realize what I kind of want to do and different interests that I might have, now all of a sudden this leads me to that, to which leads me to that. Like I know a story of a buddy of mine. He graduated and like he wasn't an athlete or anything like this, but he essentially took up salsa dancing as like an interest, and he had done all this like massive like extracurricular stuff throughout his like time at the university. And then fast forward, he's trying to find a job, sits down in an interview, ends up getting the job because the guy was just like, oh yeah, no, like, do you know why I hired you? And he's like, no, why? And he's like, well, what I loved about you was you just said that like one of your interests was like salsa dancing. And to me, that showed that you were just a quick learner and you're quick on your feet and you can figure things out. So that's why, whether because you were lacking in, say, I forget what the job, but let's just say it's marketing or consulting, like
Yeah,
where he lacks in that skill set, it's just like, I know that you're going to be able to learn that much quicker because of your hobby in salsa dancing, which was really interesting.
that's actually one of my advice when I like talk to athletes coming out of university. I'm like, put a bottom section of your resume of interest. Don't put anything related to the sport, and just put something.
Mhm.
And I was like, for me, I think I put chess and Sudoku as my two things, so like side interests. And my first interview with the person asked me, "Oh, I love Sudoku." And like we talked about Sudoku for the first 10 minutes of a 30-minute interview. You know how much easier the interview is if you only have to interview for 20 minutes instead of 30 and like they already like you. So I was like, that's what I always tell them, like, fine. And like, that's probably why I even got the interview in the first place was the Sudoku thing. Right. So it's like, those things matter so much. And I tell people, like, don't make your like resume so professional, like add some type of like, hey, I'm a human.
Yeah, I have a dreams list on mine. It's
That's good.
something a little bit different, but I'm always just like, hey, here's like what I want to do. It was funny because I was reflecting on them because somebody had asked me to help them with an application for a similar graduate program that I'm in, and I was like, oh well, like here's mine, and it's like it's funny to even look back and I'm like, oh yeah, like I've already reached that dream already, like within the 4 months that I wrote it down at. It was essentially I wanted to start a scholarship at my old high school to like help people like in my field, just like something small. And
Mm-hmm.
over the Christmas break, I was like, okay, yeah, you know what? Like, let's do that now. But yeah, so that's one thing that I have. I just have like, yeah, here I wanna write a book. I wanna host a late night show or things of that nature. I'm not sure how like your company's gonna help me get there and do that one of these days, but like that's just like me and like what I inspire to have happen in my life.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Like, I honestly love that idea.
Yeah, well, this is I'll clip this part for resume tips on. So one thing that I wanted to chat with too, because you were a leader, you were a captain 3 out of the 5 years. In terms of leadership, how'd you handle that? And especially, in those moments, like a lot of guys are looking at you in terms of how to react.
Yeah, I think when I reflect on my leadership, especially in my fifth year, I think fourth and third year, I thought I did a pretty good job as a leader. But I think as a veteran, like fifth year, I don't think I was a great leader because I try to do a one style fit all,
Mhm.
and I think that was my biggest mistake. Having played for guardsmen and like the Carleton program, like their leadership styles, like every leader is the same, and like they win, right? So I thought that was a good leadership style, the way I was taught to be a leader through the guardsman program, and it works when your entire culture buys in. Even when your whole culture buys in, I still don't think it's a good leadership style, but that's a different conversation. So I tried to like be one of those ones who were like, if you messed up, I yelled at you. If you didn't know the plays, I yelled at you. And like, I don't think I really got mad at people for things that didn't make sense. I was never like, if you missed a three, I wouldn't yell at you. I'd be like, oh, no one misses a shot on purpose.
Mhm.
But I think the bigger thing was like, I just didn't like realize that doesn't work for everyone. And just because they can't handle that yelling doesn't mean they don't want to win. And so I think that's probably my biggest regret of my 5 years is just not adjusting my leadership style and not understanding that like that's not a recipe for winning. And I think off the court, I think I had great relationships with everybody. I always helped them with anything I possibly could. But I think that was my one takeaway. And I think in my third and fourth year, I wasn't as much that way because I wasn't like a fifth year senior. I think it was just when I was fifth year, I thought I had to be like that for some reason. And it's like definitely one of my biggest regrets when I played.
Would you say you're authentically like that individual? Like that's kind of how you are in a sense, where like you're vocal like that? Because the reason why I ask is essentially the premise of it all is sometimes when you go into certain situations and you feel like you need to be a certain individual or a different type of leader or coach or something that you're not, a lot of people see right through that and like effectively it just doesn't work.
Yeah, so I think I'll try to answer that question like two parts. I think what I was getting mad about was right.
Hmm.
So I think like when you don't know the plays and you're lost on defense, like I think those are two like things. Even as I coach now, like those two things drive me crazy because those are two things anyone can control,
Yeah.
right? So
I
I
agree so much. Like I remember even playing like high school and it's just like getting mad at like a teammate just because it's like, dude, like we're over this and like practice. And this isn't anything with like physical ability or anything like that. It's legitimately just you need to be at this position at
exactly.
this point in time.
Yeah, or set this screen at that time. That's a play. We only have five. Like know our plays,
Mhm.
right? So like those were the things I got mad about. I think like in that moment of being like in the player, because just where I played club ball and all that, I think it was authentic for me to get mad. Like you raise my voice. I am like I like to talk. I am pretty loud. I think that's just like natural. But I think now, like being 28 and like looking back and like being like trying to be a leader among like younger men, like U17, U16 kids, I just realized it was wrong. So I don't know if that really answers your question because like that's who I thought I was, or no, I think that's who I was.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I just kind of realized it was wrong, and then I adjusted and realized, hey, some people need encouragement, and that's not a big deal. Like if they don't want to be yelled at, right? Obviously, if they make the mistake like 4 times in a row, yeah, you might have to yell eventually. But like yelling on the first time, just I don't think that's right, and that's my regret. I think like I could have been more patient and like waited for a few more mistakes before I got mad. But I just wanted to win. So, and so there's a bit of both, right? Like if you want to win, it's the MJ thing where he's like, but MJ won a lot of games. So I'm not trying to compare myself to MJ. But like, that mentality, it's like, you look crazy if you don't win. And we didn't win. So I kind of look crazy. So,
It's interesting though, because now I'm almost thinking that like authentically who you are in terms of, you saying now that like you're reflecting back on it in a sense of like, that's the type of person that you are. You're that super intense individual, but now you also have these qualities of, trying to grow and have like a personal development within each different situation. So that's probably why you're looking back on it being like, yeah, you know what? No, like I authentically am that person, but now I have this knowledge, and you also have these character traits that are almost conflicting with each other.
yeah, I think that's actually a great way to answer that. Thanks for that summary because now I know how to answer that question in the future. But yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it. And like I do think like with sports, like if I don't know if any parents are listening, like your kid's gonna get yelled at and don't get mad. That's one thing. Like I think that's part of sports. I think learning how to accept it and move forward helps. But with that being said, coaches don't yell on the first time. The kids are learning, they're trying. I like effort, like you said, effort and like just knowing where to be. I think those are two things that like it's okay to yell at, but you also have to know when, right? Like understanding and things like that. And I think I just didn't know when.
Hmm. Yeah, well, I think it's interesting too because now I'm thinking about how, like, in certain situations when like I would react, and like I'm one, I've been fine with a lot of the yelling and like some of the coaches that I've had in that like intensity, but there are definitely moments where like if you yell at me, like that's gonna fire me up. But then on the flip side too, that like I know there's particular moments where like that would actually break me, and I'd probably, even start crying at like the younger ages of like 15, 16.
For sure, right? So it's like it's just knowing your players, and I thought like I give Coach Jimmy a lot of credit for this. He yelled at me when I needed to be yelled at, and he brought me up when I needed to be brought up.
Mhm.
And I don't think there's very many times after being yelled at, I'm like, oh, this guy just doesn't know me. You know what I mean? And maybe other players might have different perspectives when they played for Coach, but like I think he knew me very, very well and knew how to get me fired up and like when to. So I think that's like, and I think the bigger thing too was playing for guardsmen. I just always got yelled at. So like I remember the first time I got positive reinforcement from Coach Jimmy, I'm like, this is weird. I was like, why are you saying good job?
Uh, I love this because it actually kind of segues into this point of it was essentially a story that you told me that I found was like really interesting because demeanor on the court is always so it's put under a microscope tremendously, and people always evaluate it. And suddenly a smack on the ball, or you're smacking the hardwood, or you're showing physical frustration, now all of a sudden every reporter or fan on the sideline is being like, oh well, this guy can't compose himself mentally, how can he bring this team to a championship, or things of that nature. I forget the teammate that you were telling me about, but essentially you had a teammate who would, you know, physically like showcase his frustration with like, slapping the ball and things of that nature. But you told me that that's what he does to get back into that zone. So then when other players try to do it because they were seeing he was doing it, you were like, no, no, no. Like this doesn't work for you. Like that works for him and that gets him back. Like you're just doing this and it's frustrating you and it's putting you down more in this like rabbit hole. Whereas for him, it can leeway into, okay, I just went 0 for 4. Now I'm going 4 for 5.
Yeah, it's like one of those things where it's like you miss a three and you swear, right? And like, does your head go down or does it not, right? So, like, if your head goes down, it means you're down. You're not helping yourself. One of those things. And like this guy, yeah, he would do some really ridiculous things when he wasn't playing well. Like wouldn't talk to you, wouldn't high five you. But once you got to know him, like, hey, he just needs this. He'll be back. We'll be fine. And but it's hard because he was one of our better players, and people look up to him, right?
Mhm.
So I think that comes down to like, and I think of what you're saying too, when we talk media too, when you see the NBA, NFL, like these media reporters don't know A, the team chemistry, and B, don't really know what's going on like behind closed doors. So just because like he's kicking a ball in practice and like some person sees it up there, we all know it's fine. Like, hey, he's gonna
Mhm.
be okay. But yeah, I think the biggest thing, like, I'm ranting a little here, but it's just like knowing who you are and like knowing what works. Like for me, like just swearing, like that was enough. I'm like, okay, I'm back in this. Like the second I put my head down, that's when I need somebody to, like, bring me back up, right? And I think that's for most people, it is something like that. Like very few people are to that extreme where they need to kick a ball or whatever, or like really let it out when they're struggling. But if they are, like, I think it's just understanding and like trying to make them like pick their moments and not like if it's an everyday outbreak, I think that needs to change, but an occasional one.
Mhm. I think what you said though too, in terms of like being able to know what goes on behind closed doors, I think that's one of the most underrated aspects in terms of evaluating sports, right? Like you see certain guys get captaincies, and sometimes people are like, oh, like this guy, like this doesn't make any sense, right? But I truly believe that you cannot fully understand an organization unless you are within the locker room and like when those doors are closed and it's just the team.
Yeah, I mean, perfect example is Miles Garrett. Guy took his helmet and beat someone with no helmet on. And he was a captain the last 5 weeks and he got nominated for Walter Payton of the Year award. Like, and then I actually like looked into what he did. He's a great human being. And the fact the media isn't showing that enough of how like he's really trying to take away that image is like I think it's a negative thing because like there are great humans out there. And like I think a good example is like Tom Brady. No one's gonna question 6 championships. He's great. Um, but he yells at a teammate or kicks a water bottle or whatever. They're always a fiery competitor. Odell Beckham Jr. kicks a net and they're like he can't keep his composure. So it's just like, is it really like so like and like nobody? I don't think any teammate has really come out and said they don't like playing with Odell, right? Like I think it's just GMs and coaches hate playing coaching him, which might be
Uh,
an issue.
yeah, there's definitely a race thing that implicates that, definitely. Like when you look at it, like yeah, like
Yeah,
Odell is getting all these negative feedbacks for his actions, which are very similar to Brady's, but yeah, Brady gets condemned for him, right? Or positive reinforcement for
yeah. The best skit for anyone listening, just go listen to Racist Commentary by Key and Peele. It's a 2.5 minute skit, and you'll see all you need to. And it's just like, it's also very funny, but very sad at the same time when you watch a Key and Peele skit because they do that to you. They bring real life topics into humor. But it's just, we tend to frame things like when a white player is really good, they're methodical. When a black player is really good, they're fast. Like it's just, it's different.
yeah, it definitely needs to change. There's no question in that. It's just how I guess we get there.
Agreed.
So now going into because I mean, I'm trying to like regather my thoughts because we we definitely just covered a lot so quickly. But looking back now too, because one thing I wanted to mention, we've chatted about some D1 programs as well, and like the NCAA route, whereas Canadian and things of that nature, and obviously it's put on a pedigree, but and there's this overwhelming picture that the NCAA is just so much significantly better than what's going on up here in Canada. But your group as a whole, I'll rhyme off the names here. You beat TCU, Indiana, Vermont, Chicago, Illinois, Murray State, all D1 programs. What do you think that says about, Canadian basketball, Ottawa basketball, and then, just your group as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, the group we had was special. Like we just knew each other so well, played so like that. When we played these guys in August, even though we practiced, I think 2 times before, we just knew the plays. We knew how to play together, and we just like we never skipped a beat. Um, so I think that's like one advantage I will say before I get into the details. Like we do get a practice in the off season, and NCAA doesn't, and their
Mhm.
turnover is much higher. So playing them in August is much more advantageous for us. But regardless, like we're seeing Jamal Murray, we saw what he did in the bubble. He's a Canadian. We're seeing Wiggins playing some of the best basketball I've seen him play with Golden State these first 10 games. Like we're getting high draft picks. We're getting guys going to high D1 schools. Like Team Canada is going to be very good for the first time in a while. But the thing is, where I'll draw the line is going to Kentucky, going to a Tennessee, going to like one of these Wisconsin's big time schools. Like, yeah, that's the goal. Also going to a Vermont, like the mid majors, like the Murray States, those ones, also equally good goal. But the second you start going to schools you've never heard of, you're not sure, like, hey, like what is this Tennessee Tech State? You know what I mean? Like, I think that's where you're making the wrong decision as a young athlete because one, when basketball ends, that degree means nothing when you come back to Canada. Like the government or anyone's going to look at a University of Ottawa degree of which much higher meaning than a low D1 that nobody's ever heard of. On top of that, the basketball is not better. So because those low D1 schools, the only time they get to play at Kentucky is when Kentucky needs a warm up game. Although Kentucky lost that warm up game this year, so
Yeah, well,
maybe they should not do that. But like, do you really want to be that 80-point win for Kentucky to get their season started? You know what I mean? And like, so that's where I kind of draw the line is like when kids are choosing low D1 schools over CIS, you're hurting your own basketball career. You're hurting the U Sport game because like it's great basketball. These guys, the top 5 teams can compete with mid majors in the States. So you're hurting like that. And you're just also hurting your long-term future, like workplace prospects by getting a degree from somewhere you're probably not going to live for the rest of your life. Right. Like, and not just like it's not like a degree that no one's heard of on top of that, you know what I mean? From a school no one's heard of.
well, no, it's always a big thing, right? Like, there's a lot of institutional pride in these cities where the schools are, right? So when you're applying for jobs and now all of a sudden, you're in Ottawa and it's a Carleton or a U Ottawa degree, more times than not, the person sat across from you at the table also went to Carleton or U Ottawa, right?
Yeah. Yeah, right. And that person knows what to expect from someone who has a U Ottawa or Carleton degree. That person won't know what to expect from South Florida Incorporated Tech something. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
Yeah, no, it's a good point. And so now, going back into like institution and education, you end up doing your master's at Queen's. Kind of take me through why you decided to do that and, why Queen's, and you couldn't play basketball anymore. Like you were officially done.
yeah.
Yes. You just kind of were now looking just in terms of academics.
Yeah. So basically, I was applying for a bunch of jobs and I wasn't getting even interviews. And I couldn't add experience because if you're not getting jobs, how can you add experience? So I was just like, I think it was about December or January of 2017. So my career ended March of 2016, graduated April 2016. So I was like 7 months in, I'm like, hey, like the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Like I'm not getting these interviews. So I looked into programs. My friend did this program at Queen's. She spoke ravingly about it. She said how easy it was to get a job after, and then all that stuff. So I was like, okay, like let's look into it. And I looked into it. I ended up getting accepted. And it's an international business program, so I got to do half of it in Sweden. And at the time, I had no idea what consulting was. I still wasn't sure I was going to be a consultant. I was like applying for government jobs. I got like a bunch of different things, and it just wasn't working. But this program is meant to put you into consulting afterwards. So then they introduced me to consulting. And it was kind of cool. I was like, hey, I could maybe see myself doing this. And then, yeah, I think the best part of that program though was I got to go to Sweden for 5 months. I played semi-pro basketball by like accident out there. It just worked out. Like luckily,
How do you stumble into semi-pro basketball while you're doing your masters in Sweden at Queen's?
you go on a Facebook group and you write, is there anywhere I can play basketball? And then you get lucky that Sweden, people of Stockholm have one big group of like 10,000 people, the only 10,000 people that probably play basketball in all of Stockholm in one group. And because my profile is like, my Facebook profile is not fully closed. So you can see all my profile pictures. even if we're not friends. So I guess one guy played D2 somewhere, and I forget the school now. And he went through my photos and he recognized, because he was in Indiana, like his school was in Indiana. So when we beat Indiana, it was apparently really big news in Indiana.
Okay, yeah,
I had
true.
no,
Well, it probably definitely would be.
yeah, apparently they were like there was petition signed to get the coach fired after that. And like someone did a GoFundMe after that game to pay for the buyout, because apparently it was like $10 million if they fired the coach to pay him out.
Oh
So
my gosh.
yeah, Indiana fans, I guess they were all watching that game with a lot of like, hey, and they ended up losing to us.
The Canadian boys just out here getting coaches fired.
Yeah, right. So it was like, but I didn't know. I just knew like in the moment, like obviously I checked Twitter after, and like there was a few tweets about it, but like nothing. I think it's like a couple hundred at most. I'm like, oh, it's not a big deal. Like this guy's fine.
Yeah.
But apparently it wasn't a big. It was a big deal. So he recognized, and he's like, "Hey, you're like the guy who had 7 threes against Indiana." I was like, "Yeah, like a few years ago." And like, and then he's like, "Do you want to come play?" So I ended up trying. Like I played for their 3v3 team, which is like usually most people when they're done playing like pro join those teams. So I joined that, and then one of our teammates was like an assistant coach for another program, and he was just like, "Hey, like come practice here." And then like it just all started, like the ball started rolling, and I was just playing a lot of basketball in Stockholm.
So, I don't mean to, be rude and ask you about money, but were they paying you? Like, did this become like a part-time like student job for you then?
It didn't cost me anything, but I didn't get paid.
Okay, all right. No,
It was
sometimes,
like playing university in essence.
yeah, it's almost sometimes with the semi-pro tag. Like sometimes people affiliate that with like some form of payment, where like sometimes it's like senior hockey in Newfoundland, where these guys get like $500 to play 2 games on the weekend, and then they go and work their 9 to 5 during the week.
Yeah, like you definitely could not just be a semi-pro player in Stockholm and like do nothing else. I think I was the only one who didn't have a job, but it's because like I was in school.
Yeah.
Like all my teammates all had full-time jobs.
What was the atmosphere in those games?
Like I don't know, like 100 people, if that.
Just crickets, basically. You're hearing the twine in the net just go poof. Like.
It's your team and their family. Maybe the pro league was better though. I wouldn't watch like the pro 18 play, and like they would get out in the thousands, but like not packed. But yeah, semi-pro, like nobody cares.
Yeah. You grew up in Ottawa and played with a group of guys who pursued European ball as well. Did like you get to see any of those guys play in your time in Sweden? Because
Caleb.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
So what was that like? Because I want to dive into that now. Actually, like just playing with guys like Caleb and Johnny, and like essentially the greatest of all time in terms of Ottawa basketball, and obviously watching them constantly, new milestone after new milestone, succeeding, contract extensions to this day even, right?
Yeah. So unfortunately I've only watched, or fortunately, Johnny plays in good enough leagues where there's video streams. So I've been fortunate though, although I haven't been able to watch Johnny in person. I've been able to watch it online. But Caleb was the first one I went and watched in person, because his first pro contract was with a team in Barcelona. So like, one, it's fun to go visit. Johnny was in Estonia his first year. Nobody's coming to see you there. Sorry, Johnny. Now he's a much better league, so it's like more fun if we go to see him. But so Caleb lucked out with that, and then I just randomly messaged Caleb because like I also played on my school team at Stockholm, which once again, you just show up and you're either on the team or you're not. Like it was the most informal thing I've ever seen. But I'm like, hey, like we have a tournament in Barcelona this weekend. Like, are you in town? He's like, yeah. He's like, coincidentally, Mo and Zach are coming too that same weekend.
No way.
I was like, whoa, like what are the chances of this? So we all like got together in Barcelona, and actually Demetrius, who was a fifth year my second year. So there was like 5 of us in Barcelona, like all at the same time by coincidence, or I was the coincidence. And it was crazy how much fun it was like watching his game. So like we went to his game, and apparently they were playing a rival, and the whole gym was packed. And I think full capacity would have probably been like 800 to 1,000. It was a pretty small gym because his team was it was one of the poorer teams in the tier 2. Okay. So he was like, when we go to like the top teams, like it's way different, way better facilities, all that. And the other team, like they brought drums. It was loud. Like I couldn't hear myself think at certain points. I was like, this is really cool. And like Caleb's team was supposed to be one of the worst teams in the league, and they ended up finishing second. So it was like I remember he was telling me on the train, because like when you in Europe, if you finish top three, you get relegated up. You finish bottom three, you get deregulated down. The owner came up to them like, hey, if we finish top two, or like he's like, sorry, if we win the league, we have to move up, and I can't say no, which means I'll have to sell the team. So he was like, he wasn't telling them to lose, but he was kind of like, hey, I won't be your owner anymore because I can't afford for you guys to move up. So it's really interesting, that kind of aspect, when like Caleb was telling me all the politics that goes into it and all that. So
there's so much, like there's so much more that like meets the eye, and it's like, hey, yeah, listen, don't throw the game, but just so you know, if you win, I can't afford to own you.
Yeah, right. It's such a weird thing because Caleb's like, we all love the owner, but he's like, but at the same time, we're not throwing games. And like, basically, what that team did was Johnny was in that league the year before and killed it. So basically, that program was like, hey, Canadians are pretty cheap. And they got like 4 Canadians on the team. They got like a guy from Windsor, they got Caleb, they got some like American from a low D2. And like those 3 guys just became the key parts of the offense, and like they started winning a ton of games. So I think like Johnny like opened this floodgate to the tier 2 Spain league. Like I think Jean went there Jean spent a year there last year. Like it's pretty amazing what Johnny did, and it's not just for you Ottawa people; it's all CIS U Sports.
I'm like shaking my head and acting like I know these people. Obviously, I only really know you from that era, and like I just know the names. But I did have the pleasure of actually meeting Johnny once, I believe, at a U Ottawa playoff game. He was in town over like Christmas break or like an off season or whatnot. Super nice guy, I gotta say. Like just very genuine, very humble as well too. And like, you know, yeah, the path that he's been able to help for like other, he definitely seems like a guy who doesn't understand or maybe doesn't want to give himself the credit of how much he's done for Canadian basketball players.
Yeah, it's the credit. He for sure won't give himself the credit he deserves. He's arguably the most humble person I've ever seen. That anytime we called him, like whenever we post his highlights, we like put like the little goat symbol on iPhone and like all that, and like he'll say thank you, but he hates when we like put that symbol next to him. He's just so humble. He like we would always be like in the change room after a big game, like you're the best player. He's like, no, like shut up. Like, he's just so humble. Like it almost got to the point where if you complimented him, he hated it. He's like, he just wanted to always pass credit to someone else. And like, when that's your leader, it explains why our team had such good success throughout his career. It was solely directed to his like humbleness and like his work ethic.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I've seen some of those Insta stories and his reactions to him too. Cause I think, I forget who it is, but
Brandon.
Yeah, he always screenshots the conversation and tosses it up. I get a kick out of it, man. It's pretty funny because it's like, man, like you are like one of the best to like, if not the best ever wear U Ottawa Gee-Gee's basketball jersey. And so now, you know, you've talked about Sweden, Barcelona, and we had a conversation which was pretty interesting, and you were telling me about all the different places that basketball is taking you in terms of the travel and things of that nature. What have been some of your favorite places? And like, you know, sometimes when you just sat there and reflecting and you're like, holy smokes, like I'm here right now because of this sport.
Yeah, I think it really hit me when I was in Sweden and where it took me, because I didn't expect it to take me anywhere. So I think that hit me the most, because I went to Germany, I went to Russia, I went to Finland, I went to Norway, went to Belgium. Like I did all this stuff just because of basketball, and I was just like, how is this still happening? One, like that kind of hit me. I'm like, I wasn't supposed to be here to be a basketball player. But like that's one of those things with the identity shift. Like, don't ever fully give it up, because you just never know, right? So like keeping that part of me, it let me create friends in Sweden and all that stuff. I would say the coolest place was South Korea. We went there going into my 5th year, so summer going to my 5th year. Going with just the U Ottawa people, and like it was like this weird thing where they were hosting the FISU games, so they gave us the treatment as if they would give like a country like that was coming to play South. So like we were actually just warm up. We were a warm up tournament for them to see if they had any issues or kinks with like their logistics, like all that kind of stuff. So they paid for everything. They paid for our flights. They gave us this luxury bus that like had these nice recline like leather seats, like unbelievable bus. And then like we were staying at the Olympic Village in Seoul, and like it was just insane. Like I was
You're
like in
just rolling
shock.
up there feeling like you own the country basically at that point.
Yeah, basically like the first 3 days I felt like on top of the world, and then I realized we had to play other countries and we started losing. I was like, yeah, okay, yeah, I'm not on top of the
Yeah,
world.
how'd those games go for you?
So we played Japan first, and we should have
Yeah.
won. Like I will say that to this day, like we were better than Japan. Oh, side kicker Johnny and Caleb were not on our team because they were on the FISU Canada team. So we
Oh,
were
yeah,
missing
fair enough.
two starters and
Yeah,
like
that's
two
two huge
two very
players.
important starters. So not
Mhm.
just like not like me missing where we'd be okay. Like so we should have won. I think we lost by 3 or 5. And then we played the South Korea A team, and we got fucking destroyed. I had to throw the F word in there because it was bad.
It's
Like
just yeah, the F
it
word
was
just
like
has that emphasis for that loss.
we yeah, they had like they're all like 6'6" or 6'7" across the board. Like they didn't have a like we couldn't tell who their center was and we couldn't tell who their point guard was. They were
Mhm.
all the same height and they all did the same thing. And it was just like insane. And they would sub guys in with the same skill set. Their offense never dropped, their defense never dropped. And in Asia, they don't call travels unless it gives you an advantage. So these guys would be walking like a half court without dribbling, and we're all like, "What is going on?" So it was very interesting when we play. And then they also bank every free throw, which was that also completely threw us off. Like they would go to the free throw line and throw it, and like the Seoul Basketball Arena, I think it was 1988, they hosted it. So the backboard is pretty old. So they could just whip it as hard as they could at the square, and it would drop in. And they knew that because they practiced there. So we're like watching them just like whip the ball as hard as they can free throw wise, and just like they went 30 for 30 against us. I remember it was for 32, something ridiculous. They didn't miss a free throw with this
Wow.
strategy. So yeah, we got destroyed against them. Then we played the Russians, and their average height I think was like 6'11". Like they had a 7'3" guy. They had one guy on their team who was like projected second round at the
Okay.
time, and I should have followed him because he was a pretty cool guy, but I never checked what happened in his career. But he destroyed us. We ended up losing by like 40 because like our center was Gab, who's like 6'5". I'm 6'7", 6'8", but can't jump very high. So like we just never had a chance. And then we beat South Korea's B team. So
Okay.
we got one win out of it, but we should have probably been 2-2.
It's so interesting to see the same sport in different countries and how different it is, but similar and different. Because what you were saying with like the differences in South Korea and their game and their style of it. I was fortunate enough to get to go, and I've mentioned it on this podcast too. For one, European crowds are incredible,
Incredible.
and so it's so much fun. The atmosphere is always crazy. But when I went to Germany with like men's hockey, even watching just like the European version of the hockey game and how, yeah, like it's a bigger rink size, but even the different play styles and hitting and body contact isn't as relevant or apparent in their games. So there's a lot of nasty stick work that coincides with it.
Yeah, I think I heard something about that too. They're saying like World Juniors, I think it was, where they're saying like these other European countries don't do much hitting. So then when they come to play Canada and US, they're just not used to the hitting, and it's also the refs aren't used to officiating that way. So it's like a huge culture shift for like the European refs and teams.
And it's interesting that like that in sport is a thing, right? And typically too, a lot of the times you're seeing, sometimes there's particular players who stand out in those type of tournaments, and when you look at their background, it's like, oh, okay, they're playing like their junior and like the OHL, or they're like super young and playing in like a men's league in like their country, whether it's like Sweden or Austria or whatever it may be, right? So
Mm-hmm.
there's so many different like factors that play into it all, and eventually sometimes, especially in the tournament style, by the time you get the hang of it and like know how to readjust, it's too late at that point, almost, where like you maybe only have like one game left and you're already out of like the play in round or play off round.
Yeah, yeah. I find it's unfortunate when like the best leagues in the world for the most part, like in the US, because then it takes away that cultural differences of how the sport could be played differently
Hmm.
and other, right? Because then you're like, okay, if I want to be in the NHL, I got to be able to hit,
Yeah.
right? And like if you're an NBA, I got to be able to dunk, although that's starting to change now. We're starting to see like the Nikola Jokic's of the world, where it's like, hey, if you're super skilled and at least somewhat athletic, we'll find like Luka Doncic. Like, you know what I mean? Like these guys are starting to take over the NBA. So it's cool. It's starting to see cool the other shit where the Europeans are like, hey, we're just gonna get very good at what we do. You're gonna need
Yeah.
us anyways.
Yeah, I'm gonna make sure I am so good at what I do that you just can't ignore me.
Yeah, that's basically what happened. Like, hey, your bigs don't shoot threes, ours will.
After your playing days, you kind of touched on it a little bit. You've gotten into coaching a lot now. What was the driving force to that? Because I mean, obviously, it's a lot of responsibility, and yeah, I mean, you certainly invest a lot of time in it. And the thing is, too, is I kind of wish I had you as a high school coach because I've seen firsthand. Because you had me in take some photos of, your high school group, but yeah, like you put a lot of effort and you try and like make sure that everybody's looking good and you got the newest jerseys and it's a lot of funding and extra things like that on your side of things.
Yeah, the biggest thing for me was I knew I couldn't have gotten where I got without the CIS coaches I had. Like, regardless of I'm not a fan of the leadership style or whatever, like they were amazing people to give their time, and they taught me so much about X's and O's. So like my thing is if I can help one kid who's like a borderline university player because they're not very athletic, but I gave them the coaching, like the knowledge and like how to get there that they wouldn't have gotten without me, then it's all worth it. So that's really what my main reason of doing this was. Like I just want to help someone the way I got helped. And like I'm not one to like say, hey, I made it on my own. Like I didn't. I know that for a fact. So that's the biggest thing. And I chose Gloucester, one because it was close to me, but more importantly, I know they have more kids with lower income situations. So I was like, I want to give it to people who can't like afford to pay for like a personal trainer to like teach them these skills to teach. So that was the other reason why I chose Gloucester was I wanted to give it to people. I wanted to help kids who just couldn't be helped otherwise, and like to give them opportunities. And Gloucester is a great organization. Like they find ways to help kids who can't afford the fees and like all that. So I didn't have to also like limit the traveling or all that stuff. We found ways. So I think it was just like a good match. And originally, I just wanted to be an assistant coach, and then halfway through the year, the head coach made a decision for us to swap positions because he thought it was best for the team. And honestly, like I've never seen that happen or heard of that happening. So for someone to self-reflect like that and make that decision was amazing to see. And we're also very close now. I think we're closer now than when we were coaching together, which is interesting. But
Yeah.
yeah, and then it's just like really what it came down to is I also love the game. So like seeing 17-year-olds like they're just excited to play basketball, right? And like yeah, you're gonna get their days where they're not, and like that's life. But like it was just fun to be around kids who like like I told them who I was, what I did, and what my like I'm willing to help them to get to university. And then some of them really bought into that and wanted to make it. And they're like, hey, this is a good opportunity. Others didn't, but that's life. And like they're still fun to coach just because like they didn't want to play university. And yeah, it just comes back to my main point. I just really wanted to help some kids that couldn't have gotten help out otherwise.
No, I mean it's super noble of you, right? And I mean I don't know what your ambitions are for coaching, but a lot of times it's easier to grab that good group from the rich school, and you're going to win a lot of games, and people are going to affiliate you as the coach with that. And now all of a sudden it's just like, oh hey, want to coach this college team? Oh hey, want to coach this university team, right? But sometimes it's like if you're in that role it almost doesn't matter who's in that role because you'll have the same result because the money's there and the financials are there, right? But you know, it takes a lot of self-reflection and a completely different person to go into a program that's, not it's not the perfect situation. It's not the white picket fence or anything like that. Like it's going to be some work, but the results that you can potentially get out of it, and essentially what you're going to do is change lives.
Yeah. And like what you said, I could have gone back to Goulburn where I played basketball growing up, and like they would have given me they give you a stipend if you coach and you don't have a kid on the team, right? And like I grew up in Stittsville. I know the families there, like they have money, like right, like Stittsville's not a poor area by any means. So I could have done that, and like they've been asking me ever since I've been done playing, like, will I come back and coach again and all that? Because I did do assistant coach, but I was like, that's not what I want to do, and that's not the people I want to help. But that said, the team I would have coached ended up winning. Or I was going to coach U15. They ended up winning D1, like being the best team in the province. So I was like, maybe I chose the wrong team. But no, all things considered, yeah, I was just like, for me, it was just the bigger thing was like I want to help someone who can't help, and also I didn't want it to be an inconvenience. So if I was going to Stittsville every night, like that's an inconvenience. It's 30 minutes out of one way drive.
Mhm.
So Gloucester was good. It was like it was close. It's still like a 15, 20-minute drive for some practice, but it mattered more, I thought.
Yeah, well, and with every decision, also you do need to look at, different moments of, selfishness and essentially being like, I need to, yeah, I really want to do this or this kind of thing, and but at the end of the day, I do need some give back in a way. And for you in that particular situation, it's cutting down on drive time and it being super convenient. But then you also hit on your different aspects and morals and goals and ambitions of, okay, I really can kind of help kids who are going to essentially get on this path that they might have not had before if it wasn't for me chatting with them, being like, hey, like university is an option, right? Like,
Yeah.
I know for me growing up, uh like even just like in my high school and talking about more so on the academic side as opposed to financial, for me, like I wanted to do journalism, and it took me till like, realistically, I would say my first year college at like in Newfoundland, or even like once I got to Ottawa, to actually really understand like how good of a school Carleton was for journalism to like look at in a way, right? So it's like
Mm-hmm.
sometimes if you don't have like that knowledge and you're not expected to because you're a kid, like you're a teenager, then you make different life decisions that alter paths completely. For myself, it was interesting because now it's like I'm very fortunate, and I think I love the fact that U Ottawa was my post-secondary institution of choice when it all kind of came down to it. But there were a lot of points there where I was just kind of like, what, I'm guessing. Like, I really don't know like what institution is going to be right for me. I don't know what institutions or programs I should really be looking at. Right? It's just kind of a little bit of guidance with a little bit of luck that kind of brought me into like the University of Ottawa, right? But it's incredible to look back on and be like, man, if these one or two little things, or these like in particular like non-factory like people just like didn't come into my life to be like, hey, like, and ironically non-factory, but then they become a factor because they say these couple little things,
Yeah.
and now all of a sudden it's like it clicks and it's like, oh, hey, I can do this and this is a better route for me, so now I'm going to try and do that. And then you get yourself here, and eventually you get the degree. And academics aside too, because I always kind of hate preaching essentially like institutions and higher education, because sometimes it's not for everyone, but the message at the core is whatever it is that you want to do, essentially it's like once you can kind of figure it out and go with it, really hit home on it and take pride in it and strive for it.
Yeah. And I think you hit it on the head too, right? Like I'm in this for that. I'm not in this to become a coach. Like I love what I do for a living, and like making that career shift to coaching. I think the only way that would ever happen is Coach Jimmy gives up the U Ottawa gig and he recommends me, which I hope he doesn't because I don't want to have to make that decision.
That'd
Right?
be
Like,
wow. That'd be
right?
quite the decision.
Yeah, exactly, right. So I hope he gives it to somebody else, and I don't ever have to worry about that. But like that would be the only time I'd ever consider like it. Like I'm not moving to Waterloo to coach a basketball team,
Mhm.
right? You know what I mean? Like maybe a Ryerson or UT would be cool. I wouldn't mind living in Toronto, but like you know what I mean? Like so for me, this is all just passion and like to make a difference, and that's why I love doing it. And I think that's why it just like it's sometimes, and it's also something you look forward to when work is rough.
Yeah, no, for sure. I love that, because a big thing that I've always attested to, because when my schedule gets busy and then like all of a sudden I'm going into Lexington to work a shift as like a barback or a hostess, people are like, "Why are you doing this?" And it's like, because it gets me out of my environment. It makes me think different. It hits on like I'm not a scientist by no means, but it like hits on different receptors, and I just feel more engaged now.
It's also a few hours where you're just not thinking about what's actually important, and you
Hmm.
need that. So then you can look at it with a different perspective. Now you're coming with a new mind frame. It's like why they say if you can't figure out a problem, like close your book, go do something else for 30 minutes, and then come back.
Mm-hmm. No, exactly. I want to actually chat because I mean you brought him up so much. Let's really dive into Coach Jimmy and the impact that he's had for yourself and yeah, everything with that.
Yeah, I mean, it was everything. Like my parents moved to San Diego when I graduated high school, so like I didn't really have. I had my uncle and aunt here and stuff, and they were great too. But like I don't see them every day like I saw Coach Jimmy, right? So he in essence becomes almost like everybody's like father figure for the time while you're at university or like during the season because you see him like 10 hours a day. But he was amazing for at least like I have very few like our differences were maybe on like small minor things, but like his philosophy of like he believed in me before many coaches did. Like when he emailed me in October of my grade 12 year, he was the only one who did. He was the only one who was like interested in it. And he came to my first game. We played like a really bad school and I scored like 6 points, barely played. Like our coach was like, he didn't play like me or Sean much. And right after that, Coach Jimmy offered me a scholarship. And I was just like, are you really? That's the game? I was like, the season just started and I played like 15 minutes and scored 2 points, like 2 buckets. He's like, yeah, I saw enough. Then he came to the next game. I ended up scoring like 30 or something. And he's just like, yeah, I was like, my mind didn't change. I feel just as strongly about the first game as I did this game. And like, it's something about like just having someone fully believe in you. Cause like I was a good basketball player, but I wouldn't say I was a great high school player at that point. And once I got that first scholarship offer, I had this coach like fully buy into like, hey, you're the guy I want on this my program. I want this. My game just became so much better. I just like I went like from unranked to I got ranked 50 set or 51st in the country and the Canada wide from unranked. Like I remember the website puts like who's the biggest mover. It was me, and like it was all just because like I didn't get instantly better in 3 months. I just got more confident, and like that's all it took. And I think for that, I'm very grateful for like him like reaching out to me, him taking that job. Like he was at UBC as an assistant coach before, and I know like Ottawa's he's an alumni, and he would have came back the second he got offered it. But it just all worked out perfectly. And throughout our 5 years, like he trusted me a lot. Like he would bring me in for defensive game planning and he trusted like my strategy, like brain and defense and stuff like that, where I was like helping come up with some ideas and like I just felt very involved. And like when you can involve your starters and things like that in game plans, like get their mind, like pick their brains. And I think the cool thing was he was such a young coach at the time. He was such a player's coach. He would come into some practice like, hey, this is who we got guard. This is their play. What do you guys think? And he just wanted to see where our minds are, right? And all that. And like, if you came up with something better than he originally proposed, he would not be like, no. He would explain why his idea was either better or he would take your idea. And
Mm-hmm.
like, that's kind of what you want as a coach, right? Is someone who's going to, like, they're at least listening, like, at least they're explaining their reasoning. And if you just did what he told you to do, you actually ended up playing. So it's like, he's like, hey, if you just do this 2 things, you'll play. And I started doing those 2 things, I'm playing more. And it's like, you can't really ask for much more from a coach. He's transparent. He's like, yeah, a little, sometimes he's psycho, but like all basketball coaches are, they just want to talk basketball all the time, right? Like that's their job. I don't blame them. But like, yeah, I can weigh in on a 18, 19-year-old who's trying to study finance on the side, but other than that, like it's just like it was a good time, and like I I'm very happy with the choice and like our relationship we had, and I think he wants me to join his staff. I don't think that's going to happen, unfortunately. Coach Jimmy, if you ever listen to this, but yeah, I have nothing but good things to like say about him, and like I always tell that to recruits. I'm like he's one of the few people who will generally have your best interest at heart and like not just for that season or for your basketball career, like for your life. And like that's who you want in a coach. It's like basketball side, will he help me like just be better in life? And I think Coach Amy does a really good job at that. And like I take a lot of things he did outside of basketball into my like coaching philosophy.
No, I love that. And as you're rhyming off like the Jimmy, I'm thinking of a bunch of Jimmys in my life, right? Like it's very apparent that like if you need those type of people, right? And it's always great when it kind of for you came at a time when just elevated and obviously like brought you to your game and made you more of a player and brought you into that whole post-secondary kind of landscape of things, right? Especially taking such a jump, like going from not ranked or whatever to like 51st, like that's crazy.
Yeah, no, for sure. I just also want to give a lot of credit to my high school coach,
Mhm.
Tony House. He runs CTA prep now, and like I remember when my grade 11 year, and we were like really good, and we couldn't find a high school coach, so his daughters went to our high school, and like our principal and like the basketball guy at our school, like they cornered Tony at the parent teacher conference, like, hey, can you coach these kids? Like they're really good. They're going to be really good. And like Tony hadn't coached basketball for 12 years, and he comes out, coaches us. He put us in all the big tournaments. That's how I got my rank jumping. He was one of the first coaches I had outside of guardsmen that was like really positive, but at the same time very hard. So like he was one of the guys I learned how to be like, hey, pick your moments of when to be like tough and like not. And I'm just like those two guys, Coach Jimmy and Tony. Like I'm forever like grateful for both of them. Like Tony emailed like 10 coaches for me to start the season my grade 12 year, and like we got I think 9 rejections basically straight up. And like he was like, "Don't worry, you're gonna prove them all wrong." And like he's like, I would have emailed. He's like, I felt bad. I'm like, man, you got like they knew who I was and they weren't like interested. I was like, I kind of might have hurt your rep. Like next time you need to represent a player. He's like, no, I'll do that for you. Like he's like, you're a guy I would do that for. And like that also, like that's another piece that really helped my confidence too. It's just like
Yeah,
having guys build you up. Just like I know like it's not their job, but it matters.
Well, I'm sure it's a big motivating factor for you too, right? You're like, okay, I don't want you to put your reputation now on the line because technically, I guess the only way that him vouching for you looks bad on him is if you go on and have, say, a crappy university career, you don't even make that step, right? So now if you're internally feeding that motivation and now you go on and have the career that you had in U Sport and it's successful with a lot of medals and a lot of big wins and great stats, now it's just like, hey, yeah, I got you, coach.
Yeah. I think he's had a much easier time, and CTA is also pushing out good players too. So, yeah, I think it was mutual beneficial for sure. Where like he helped me get there, and then because I played well and I ended up being a good player, it really helps him. Like now, coaches remember. I remember my first year. I think I beat like 5 of the 10 coaches, and I just like gave them a little harder shake. I'm like, hey, I emailed you guys to be on your team.
One thing I saw yesterday, so Coach Jimmy tossed up on his Insta story, and you reposted it, and it's a fantastic picture of one of your teammates who has, passed now, but he was lifting you up off the floor, and I believe it was his birthday. Uh, For me, myself, like one of my greatest fears, and like the thing that I struggle with mentally is like the thought of death and tragedy with you going through like those particular moments and you losing a teammate former like after you're playing, I mean, kind of take me through that mentally and how you've kind of combated that.
Yeah. I guess one thing I will say is like I think you talked about earlier, like what was the biggest takeaway I had from like university career. Another thing was just this brotherhood. Like there was something about like us at U Ottawa, like we did everything together. We went bowling as a team. We went Tuesday night cheap movies. We did every pre-drink. Sometimes it would just be us. Like we wouldn't invite like other friends, and like just how close and like together we were. And like I talked to other players at other programs now post university, and they don't have the same thing. Like nobody does. Like I thought that was just something Coach Jimmy says, like, oh, we're a brotherhood. I'm like, yeah, every
Mhm.
team's gonna say that, but it legitimately was. And like Mike and Johnny are two big reasons why. And so like lose. That's why I struggle. Like that's why when I say like when I refer to Jeff, I say he was a teammate, and I don't really say he was a friend, is because to me the teammate meant brother, and like that's how close we were. And that telling people he was my teammate means way more to me because of how close that group was than telling him he was just like he's a friend or a good friend or a great friend, whatever the scenario is, right? So I think like that's the closest thing I would say to brother is like calling someone a teammate, at least for me. And then I think this year it hit a little harder. My grandmother passed away a couple weeks ago. So with that and then this, I think it just like it's hard because you just knew how good of a person he was. Like that photo, I think I'm on the sideline and like he's helped like I fell up to the sideline and like he helped me up. I remember one time we played Capital Hoops, which is play at Canadian Tire Center where the Sens play, and I was freezing because like we're in this hockey arena like in the change room, and he sees that and he like throws his like Canadian Goose on me, and at that moment I was like I need to buy a Canadian Goose. But it was also just like an unselfish, like he's not playing, he's playing too, like he needs to, like, he did that. We were supposed to be in the same position when playing, or no, it's not supposed to. We were in the same position, and he was playing so well in the summer. I was like, oh shit, I might not be starting anymore. And he would always just come up to me and he'd just be like, hey, I'm getting in shape so I can get you a 10-minute, 15-minute break so then you can get back out there. I'm just like, shouldn't you like
Wow.
aim to take my spot? Like, isn't that the goal? Like, I'm happy for you if you do. He's like, nah. He's like, we're here to win a championship. We're better off if you're playing more, and like things like that. I'm just like, I don't know. The way you're playing is pretty freaking good, right? But it's just who he was. He like just so unselfish all the time. Like anytime you needed something, you could hit him up, and like I think that was the hard thing, was just like someone who had so much promise and like all that. And I can't imagine what Matt was going through and his family, and it was just heartbreaking. That's so like tragic and like out of the blue. Like, and so when you just think about it, you're like, and then I think, I don't want to say there's anything that ever cool that comes out of something like this, but one interesting thing that happened was just seeing how many of our teammates like drove to Barrie that morning. Like we all found out, I think, around midnight the night before, and by like 11 a.m., I think almost everyone Jeff played with was in Barrie, and most of us were in Ottawa or like spread out the summer. And I thought, like, as hard as that moment was, being with those people who like called him teammates and doing all that, like it made it easier. I think it made it easier on Matt. I think it made it easier on his family, seeing everybody there and just so supportive. And I think that's something that can never be lost. It's just that brotherhood and like being teammates. And yeah, you never want to see a teammate like not be here anymore. It's hard because he's just such a good person.
Yeah, I mean, it everything that you said is like I never knew who he was, but it's like from the stories that you're telling me, I'm like, wow, like this was, really an incredible individual who had such impact on like his his group of guys and the teammates, right? That all the memories that you guys shared together.
Yeah, yeah, and like he transferred here from Laurentian, so he only played 1 year and then he dropped out. But that 1 year was like, it was just special. Like our chemistry, I think, was never better than the 1 year he was there. And it's like he started a thing called the bench mob, and it's basically guys who are like not playing a lot, and they would just like send snaps and joke around. So second semester, I did come off the bench because Terry was eligible, and Terry was just much better. And I got to join like the bench mob Snapchat group, and like, man, it was so fun. Like Jeff would just be like posting photos of the scout, like not reading this because I'm not playing today, and like things like that. Where just like it brought it, because I was going through a lot of difficult things, not playing as much as I was once Terry came. Like I think my minutes cut in half, and like production, and just getting that like light sense of humor from Jeff, who's not playing at all basically at this point, and to see he can be so positive and happy and still cheer everyone. I'm like, why am I sad? You know what I mean? Like, if Jeff is not, who's not playing out, who was supposed to be like a big piece, and like he, by me getting jumped down, he got jumped down even farther. Um, and he can be this energetic and this upgoing and like have fun with like, hey, I don't need to know the scout. Like, I'm just gonna be a good teammate. Like, why am I not being a good teammate? Why am I not excited? Like, why? Like, so it's like those kind of things are so contagious. Where it's like Jeff had that contagious. Like, but if he would have gone the other route, I think the whole bench would have been very sad or mad or whatever scenario. That's the kind of power Jeff had, but he took the positivity route. So it was amazing.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. It takes a special kind of athlete to do that and know your role, right? And you hear it so much in terms of time and time again with, guys who, because when you play at such a high level, eventually, whether it's the pros or like whatever level you get to, at some point, for the most part, 99% of athletes get to a point in their career where they're no longer the best on the team. And so when you have to balance now like that ego and things of that nature and try and readjust, typically the ones that, stick around, like the role players in pro leagues, are guys who, essentially bought into their roles, realized hey, okay, I'm not going to be the star anymore, and I got to be okay with that. And here's how I can positively impact this team, and we can go on and we can win a lot of games and we can have a lot of fun. And yeah, no, I'm not going to put up 45 points a game and play almost every minute, but the whole is just going to be better off.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's the hardest thing. I think like it's my second year. Coach Jimmy said this in the huddle. He's like, I think we were all like pouting or something. And he's just like, you guys do all know you were all the best players on your high school team. And he's like, so you put all the best players on the high school team on one team. Like, still, there's only 5 guys who can be on the court. So it's how are you going to get into it? How are you going to look at it? And like the bright side of university is you're young early on. So if you're not playing, don't pout. Like just learn. Because yeah, if you're in your 4th year and you're not playing, then yeah, maybe either transfer or call it quit. But or just be happy with your role. Depends what you're looking for, right? Like if you're looking to be like a starter, then yeah, then obviously the program's not for you. But yeah, I think people don't realize the difference between like a Steph Curry and his backup is not as big as they think. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like the difference is pretty small at that level. It's just that small difference is what allows Steph to be Steph, or like LeBron. Oh, LeBron's a different like topic, but like these guys aren't far off. Like you watch them shoot like on YouTube in their practice, like they're like J.R. Smith goes like 90 for 95 every time. Like Steph Curry goes 92 for 95. It's a 2 like make difference, but that ends up to being 20 points a game, along with other things.
Oh, it's so crazy once you get into like, especially now, like with advanced analytics and like particular games and stuff like that. And like, you know, talk about essentially some more um, things in terms of like those differences. Because basically what I'm trying to segue into is your fantasy football team and things of that nature, because I've never seen a wizard in terms of fantasy football like yourself. But so essentially I'm trying to give context of like why you're mentioning like all these deep analytics and stuff like that is because you're really good at it. And, with your sports bets and your fantasy football, you tend, I haven't seen many people who win as much as you.
Yeah, I mean, like I think football is interesting because I can take a strictly data approach because I
Mhm.
don't know football well enough, right?
Okay.
So I don't let my past knowledge or like what I think is right, like influence the numbers when I see it to try to justify it. So when I see football, like football, I think is pretty cool because just like yards and that's really it, and touchdowns. So it's pretty easy to like you can get deep into the data and stuff, but like it's pretty easy to understand. And I'm not influenced by, hey, like, oh, I don't like how this guy, like when I play basketball, like when I play fantasy basketball, I'm influenced so easily. I'm like, oh, I don't like this guy's mentality. But like it could be James Harden. No, I
Mhm.
don't like how he ISOs, so I'm not going to draft him. Right? Who cares? You know what I mean? Like when I look at football, I don't look at it that way. So I think that kind of just goes more into the data perspective. You can't be biased. And I think that's why I do well with football, fantasy football. Like one league, I've been in the set. I've been in the semis every single year. And I think we're on year 8. This year, I missed the playoffs for one league by one game, but I had 6 guys miss like multiple weeks. When I started, you're in a 12-team league, you have 6 guys missing one week. Like, there's not enough depth. So injuries played a large role. But like, yeah, I think like my love for data just came through finance, and then you deal with numbers. And now I do data for a living, so I can find reasons to pull Excel data from NFL sites, and like, you know, I know how to like go through it and all those kind of things. So it's just numbers don't lie. Uh, like what's that saying? Numbers don't lie, people do. Like,
Yeah. Something like
yeah, you can definitely interpret numbers in different ways and stuff like that and justify numbers. But for the most part, if you just follow numbers, like you're not going to win all the time, but you're putting yourself in the best chance to win. And like that's really all it comes down to.
Now, I hate to do this to you, but you're a Steelers fan. Rough weekend for you.
Very,
How you
very
doing?
much. I'm fine because once again, like I take very strategic approaches to things. So it's kind
Mhm.
of like that thing when I was telling you about like, oh, we're gonna play Carlton twice in 2 weeks. Like, let's lose this one, which you should never say, but I think those things.
Mhm.
So I'm not sold on Big Ben, unfortunately. I mean, I'm thankful for everything he did for the Steelers over the organization throughout his career, but he's 39. He's gonna have a $40 million cap hit, and he's not good enough to have that kind of cap hit next year. So if there was a way to lose to make it look like Big Ben's washed up, I think that was the way. I know it sucks to lose to the Browns. I know like people who are really into history and stuff are like, this is embarrassing. I'm like, it's not embarrassing. The Browns are a good team.
Yeah, the
And
Browns are like I was looking at their roster, man, and like I mean they got Landry there, Baker Mayfield,
two
um,
best running back combo, I
yeah,
think. Like a good O line, decent D line with Vernon tearing his Achilles. I think the
mhm.
big thing was the head coach not being there. That's kind of embarrassing. And then it's just how it happened. Like the first snap over Big Ben's head, and then Big Ben's 4 picks.
Like
Uh,
500, yeah, 500 yards with 4 picks. It was just such a weird stat.
yeah, and so I thought it was like honestly, I thought it was the perfect loss. In my head, because I'm like, hey, now we know Big Ben's the guy. My thing is where I'm scared is we're gonna pull a Detroit Lions situation with our head coach, where we're like, hey, winning 11 games isn't enough, which I understand with the Steelers, it's not, but like the Lions had Jim Caldwell, goes 9-7 back-to-back seasons, 12-5 the season before that, or 12-4, sorry. They fire him for because it wasn't enough, and then we all saw what happened with Matt Patricia, like
Yeah,
right.
not great.
Yeah, apparently he had to win his last. If he was still a coach by the time he got fired, he would have had to win 38 games in a row just to tie Jim Caldwell's win percentage. Like that's how far behind he was in the same amount of time. So I just hope we don't fire Mike Tomlin because I think he's good.
Yeah, I don't think it'd be justified. Like, I mean, I think Mike Tomlin's a fantastic coach. I'm even struggling with the Eagles letting go Doug Peterson. I know the end of the season,
Agreed.
like that whole Jalen Hurts thing was a little bit questionable. But yeah, like it sometimes it's just like it's growing pains every now and then. Like you gotta buy in. Like are the Patriots gonna say see you later to Belichick after like no, like sometimes it's just like this is the nature of pro sports. Eventually we run out of cap, guys retire, we need to bring in a draft class. Like you look at and it's in every sport. You look at how good the Red Wings were for such a long period of time, and now they're back in like that, rebuild year. And sometimes you get lucky with the draft, and sometimes you don't, and you just essentially sometimes it's like if you got a great coach, maybe like I said, go through those growing pains with them for the obviously, like I said too, like we never know what goes on behind closed doors, but
Mm-hmm.
if it gets to a point where, you know, okay, hey, this coach has won us a Super Bowl, a couple winning records or,
He's
championships
never had a
and
losing record.
yeah, well, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Like
So,
Mike Tomlin's 14 years, never a losing record.
mhm. Yeah, I'm thinking of almost like different guys because Mike Tomlin's just been so consistently great.
And that's my thing is like, yeah, I get it. Super Bowls are the standard, right?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, once again, it's not a Steelers exclusive problem that they haven't won a Super Bowl over the last 10 years from the AFC, like Tom Brady was running that league. And now we look at the AFC, the four quarterbacks. I think Baker Mayfield's 24 and he's the oldest quarterback left in the AFC. That's insane. It's a new era in the AFC, right? Like Big Ben, Peyton Manning, and Tom Brady are gone. Yes, they had 17 years of dominance. Like it's over, right?
Mhm.
So I think this is a good way for the Steelers to get a new quarterback and see if Mike Tomlin's the real deal, right? Like we saw it last year, 8-8 with Mason Rudolph, right? And then unfortunately, three key players got hurt for the Steelers on defense, and this offense we knew from the start was not good enough that if the defense couldn't bail them out, they wouldn't win. And like we saw that in the last 5 weeks when Bud Dupree tears his ACL. Like now we're no Bud Dupree, no Devin Bush. Vince Williams misses 2 games because of COVID. Like all these guys on defense, and like that was the one place we could not take any injuries or COVID. Like if that happened to the offense, it's okay. Like they're already shitty. Right? Like all things considered, like I think this is good. I think like we realize, hey, we need to revamp the O line. We need a running back. Maybe we can get Etienne from Clemson or something. That'd be cool. And then maybe they pull a trade for Watson or Hurts. I would love
Wow.
Jalen Hurts. I think Sam Darnold stays at the Jets. I know you and I talked about that. I don't see him
Yeah.
leaving anymore with the number 2 pick. All signs look like they're taking the Oregon left tackle, which is the right choice to make. because Sam Darnold's a good QB in my
No,
opinion.
100%. Sam Darnold's not getting the love that he deserves. I mean, we were chatting about that more so because it'd be an interesting matchup. And then obviously, you just got that USC connection, right, with Juju there. And like I said, Sam Darnold is a good quarterback. I think once you surround him by, the parts that he needs to execute, you'll see that.
Yeah, and I think we're going to see that this year. Hopefully, they hire a good coach, and
Yeah.
they have a ton of first round picks with the Jamal Murray trade, or Jamal Adams, sorry, not Murray.
Yeah.
Like I'm excited to see, and they have ample amount of cap space. Like if the Steelers don't re-sign Juju, I wouldn't be surprised if he's at the Jets. Go connect with Sam Darnold.
Almost the alternate universe of what we were talking about.
Yeah, I would prefer in the black and yellow, but
yeah. Well, it's interesting because now that I'm even thinking about it, imagine this now. The Jets go and they hire, say, like Doug Peterson.
Oh.
They hire him. Yeah.
Yeah, with all that draft capital, that's pretty. If you're Peterson, and like all you have to do is win 3 games, it's better than the year before. Like the bar is so low.
Yeah. So like Doug Peterson goes, you get that great left tackle. They already their pick from last year's draft was solid as well on the line. Yeah. He's had a pretty good year. I think it was Mekhi Becton, maybe. I could be wrong on that. I'm trying to remember the name, but regardless, you're developing that line. You get a couple maybe free agency things like I said, the Jamal Adams, that like everybody I think almost like misinterpreted that deal in the sense of like, oh, the Jets are losing like one of their franchise players, but I was like, man, for like market value of like what they were able to like pull in from the Seahawks, like that was incredible. They got so much value out of that, especially for a guy who was like, I verbally don't want to be here.
Think about what the Texans got for Hopkins, and then that's all you have to know. The Jets won that trade, right? Like there's that, and then like also just like some of the rumors of what Deshaun Watson is going to go for, like a couple first round picks and a second. Like the fact that they could trade a strong safety who can't like actually play in the secondary, he just wants to hit people, and they got 2 first round picks for that is insane. Mm-hmm. Like it's great GMing from a bad GM team because the rest of the roster is terrible. But like that one part, actually, no, he took over after the draft. That's right, actually, because the Jets did that weird thing where they fired the GM after the draft. And they're like, if you knew you were going to fire him, why not just let the new GM? But
yeah,
that's just the Jets being the Jets.
Hey man, listen, I appreciate all your time. We've been going for a while now. This is everything and more of what I wanted to chat with you about. Obviously, this is the part of the show where I just hand the show over to you. Whatever you want to talk about, it's completely up to you. Life lesson, childhood story, any parting words. It's all you, man.
Ooh, I was not ready for this. Yeah, I guess like I don't know who your viewership is, but I'll stick to like kind of sports kind of things. But I mean, the big thing if you're looking trying to play university or whatever is just like try to do some due diligence on the programs you're looking at. Like get to know the coaches. That's really important. Those people will be there the full 5 years or 4 years. You'll be there. Like get to know them and really understand if they have your best interests at heart. And it's hard to figure that out as a 17, 18-year-old. But just ask honest questions and like look at the rosters, figure things out where you can like maybe put them in a situation to tell the truth, right? Mm-hmm. Like, hey, how many minutes do you project I'm going to get, or how many plays? And you realize the whole D line's returning. It's like half the games. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so I that's my biggest thing. And then at the same time, like just enjoy the moment. Like I reminisce sometimes a lot, like with Coach Jimmy, like on my birthday posting like basketball photos. I started reminiscing again. I'm just like, you don't remember any of the downtimes. And like everyone told me that while I was playing, like, don't worry, you're not going to remember when you're in pain. You're not going to remember this pain. You're not going to remember this sad, like the midterm stress. You're just going to remember the good things. And it's so true. Like, I don't remember the stress I had when I had 3 midterms a week, but I remember how I felt before playing Carleton, Ryerson, all those guys. So it's just like enjoy it, be in the moment. Like you don't realize how fast 5 seasons go. And like those are all things you're going to hear from your coaches, all that. But it's true. Like, man, if I could relive like my 4th year or 2nd year, like one of those years, like it'd be so much fun. I would just definitely take advantage of being a basketball player way more than I did.
Yeah, I think that's a great parting message, but I honestly, I almost forgot about this because I want to toss this in and put this on the record because you mentioned midterm stress and that clicked. you don't even have to respond to this, but I need it on the record to the fact that this guy here had a bet with one of his high school buddies that he wouldn't touch caffeine throughout his whole post-secondary. So didn't have a cup, well, not caffeine, but coffee. So didn't try coffee. Did you keep that bet through your master's too, or
Yeah,
no?
I actually
Yeah.
didn't have my first coffee till I started working at Avenai.
Okay, yeah. So you went like basically 26, 27,
Yeah, 25.
20,
25 years.
25 years without a cup of coffee, and now you're drinking like 10 a day.
Yeah, I would say I'm near at addiction point now, but yeah, I go like 3 cups a day now. But yeah, it was like, it's one of those things where I saw how my brother was like so dependent on it. And like, I don't know if he even is that, but I just thought he was.
Mhm.
And I was like, I don't ever like want it. And then one of my friends was like, hey, I bet you can't go all university without coffee. I was like, yeah, I will watch. And it was only $100. Like in hindsight, like not worth it. With now I'm seeing how much like coffee is helping me through my working days.
Well, you were like, yeah, I didn't have any coffee, but I had about like 3 Monster energy drinks.
Which is way worse for you. Like for my health, that was the worst bet of all time.
What'd you spend the $100 on?
I'm pretty sure it's still right on my Bet365 account.
Oh man,
free money.
Awesome. Yeah. Hey man, I appreciate you coming on and chatting with me. It's been great catching up.
Oh, always a pleasure, man. Thanks for having me.
All right, that's it for this week. If you enjoyed the episode, hey, do me a favor, please leave it a review. It helps push it out to more people. And in the meantime, stay best kind, guys.